Hello, welcome back to the Heroes Forge. Today, we're going to go over a debate about feminism between Brian Shapiro and Rachel Wilson. This was a really interesting debate, and I'm interested to go ahead and get down to it and take a look at it from the various angles here, like the quality of their arguments, as well as how well they actually performed. I'm going to be interested to see how this goes. All right, let's add this to stage. And we'll put myself right over here. And let's go take a look.
It's going to be history.
It starts off with Brian Shapiro's, like 14 seconds of his opening statement gets cut off. But we'll go ahead and take a look at it from there.
History versus common sense. You guys can decide for yourselves. You know, it's funny because I was talking with my manager on the way over here and we were laughing a little bit because the irony of this debate is she would not be standing here, with all due respect. She would not be getting paid to debate me if not for feminism. That's not an opinion, everybody. That's a fact. She would not have been paid to write her book if not for feminism and the people that work really hard to give her the opportunity to do this. Now, listen, I don't care how much money she's getting paid. I don't care how much money her husband makes. The fact of the matter is that she wouldn't be here if not for feminism. Again, not an opinion, fact. I've never been called a feminist before. I've been called a lot of things by a lot of people. Never been called a feminist because I don't think I am one. I'm just somebody that doesn't like to tell other people what to do with their lives, man or woman. Who am I to tell a woman, you should stay at home? You shouldn't be in the workplace. You shouldn't have kids after 30. No. I want people to live their lives and do the things that they want to do because life is short. What right do I have, man or woman, to tell you what to do with your life? Now, I'm not really sure, and I'll ask Rachel this question. What does this country look like for her? Does she not want women to work at all? Does she want us to be a third world country like Afghanistan where women are not allowed to work? Now, you're going to hear this word a lot in this debate. No, it's not going to be Donald Trump. But you're going to hear the word hypocrisy a lot. Because Rachel's made decisions in her life because of feminism. Rachel's had the opportunity to get out of relationships because of feminism. It wasn't even that long ago where women were in abusive relationships, but they weren't allowed to get out of those relationships. I don't care about someone's personal life. I don't care how many baby daddies they have. I don't care how many ex-husbands they have. It's not my business. But in this debate, it is my business because she's telling other people how they should live their life. Why is it okay for her to do that, but not others? I defer.
All right, that was an interesting opening statement. Let's go ahead and go over some of the things that Brian Shapiro tried to put out there in his opening statement. First of all, he started out with lies, saying that she wouldn't be able to go ahead and do a debate without feminism. We know that women were doing debates as a matter of combating public policy well before the 1900s. So well over 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and even further back, it has been the case that women have been like a moralizing force because they didn't have the power of the vote, so they would use other influential means to influence policy. He also had made the mistaken assertion that women couldn't be authors without feminism. There were plenty of books that were written by women before feminism became a thing. He offered an open question. What does it look like if feminism didn't exist? And then he makes a comparison to Afghanistan, which is a third world country that, things obviously look bad. And so he's trying to go ahead and put a comparison between what her viewpoint is and something that we all recognize is suboptimal. He tries to call her out on hypocrisy time and time again. And I think that right there is going to go ahead and fail to land because, like, take, for example, if you're a smoker and you smoke a pack a day and you know that it's bad for you, there's nothing wrong with being the smoker and you're addicted to nicotine and things of that nature, telling other people that it's probably not a good idea to start smoking. So hypocrisy usually is an effective way of tarring somebody if you see them doing the thing and it's detrimental to them and they have the means to make a different decision and they're not. So I think that leveled criticism of hypocrisy is not going to land for him. And then the last thing that he put out there was about abusive relationships and how a lot of women in the past did not have access to divorce, and that has not been the case for an extended period of time. Hello, Blizoid and Grandy's Garden. Good to see you guys. All right, so that was Brian Shapiro's opening statement. So let's go ahead and listen on Rachel's opening statement.
Thank you very much for that opening statement. We're going to kick it over to Rachel for her 5-minute opening as well. Rachel, I have the timer set for you. The floor is all yours.
Well, thanks for coming, everybody, and being here. It's great to see so many faces, and all of you online watching, thanks for your support. Thank you to Andrew for giving me something beautiful to look at in the front row. A whole straw man opening is brand new for me, but that should be fun. So for my opening, the topic of the debate is, has feminism been good for women and children? I'm glad we're talking about this because the whole reason I do this is that feminism has destroyed the lives of children. So let's talk about the promises of feminism, what it told women and children it was going to do, how they got suffrage passed, how they got the whole agenda passed. It was supposed to provide women with safety, equality, and happiness. Let's look at the last 100 years and see if feminism has delivered on any of those promises to women and kids. So after no-fault divorce became kind of the law of the land starting in the 60s and spread across the country, we changed all of society. Prior to 1950, there were only about 2% of kids living with single parents in a single parent home. Now that number is over 40%. Contrary to popular belief, women were allowed to leave abusive and dangerous marriages prior to no fault. No fault divorce didn't mean no divorce. It just meant you have to have a reason. So in the year 1900 alone, there were over 55,700 divorces granted to women for reasons like abuse or abandonment. Now you can just get one because you're not feeling it anymore. So what we have is broken homes, and the effects of broken homes on kids are extremely well explained in the data across all the data sets, and they're very consistent over time. So after this big wave of divorce in the 80s and all these newly single parent homes, children experienced a lot of destabilization in their lives, which put them at risk for everything you can think of. From, let's take a look at this. Fatherless homes account for children. 90% of kids who are homeless come from a fatherless home. 85% with behavioral disorders. 75% of kids in substance abuse treatment centers. 88% of kids who are committed to psych wards come from broken homes. If you look at abuse of all kinds, all the data sets show that kids who are living with a single mom and their partner are at the highest risk, more than 10 times more risk than children who are living with both married biological parents. Also for women, domestic violence didn't go away because of no-fault divorce. It shifted to cohabitative relationships. So the domestic violence rate dropped for married couples, but it skyrocketed for cohabitating couples. You are at 40% higher risk of getting abused by your boyfriend than you are your husband if you live with your boyfriend. So much for safety, I guess. What about equality? Well, men still do all the dirty, dangerous, difficult jobs. 92% of all work deaths are men. 90% of all infrastructure jobs, the essential infrastructure jobs that run everything you see here, are done by men. Women get less time for the same crime. Men get 30% longer sentences. Women get 40% more probation than sentences for the exact same crimes as men. Single mother households dominate welfare. 85% of SNAP money goes to women, to single moms. And if you look at welfare and out-of-wedlock births on a graph, they go up in tandem over the last 70 years together. So what about happiness? Are women happy? Well, unfortunately, no. We now have 26% of all American women are on at least one psychiatric drug. There's been 2 major studies done on women's happiness since sexual liberation. The paradox of declining female happiness and a follow-up study called the female happiness paradox. Both data sets across time, culture, economic status did not matter. Women's happiness has decreased both absolutely and relative to men. So in summary, no, feminism didn't deliver on its promises. It hadn't made women and children safer or happier. It made them more vulnerable to abuse and exploitation by removing the men that have the most interest in protecting them, and that would be their own fathers and their own husbands.
Thank you very much for that 5-minute opening.
All right, let's go over her opening. First of all, howdy, Smiley EBs. Good to see you. All right, so what does Rachel do in her opening statement? Let me go ahead and fix this right quick so we can go ahead and get this going. So what are some things that Rachel did? First off, she called out the straw man that Brian Shapiro had put out, where he had framed his entire argument around a straw man. And what Rachel did is she went ahead and provided 3 core things that she was looking to argue for in her opening. She wanted to talk about the promises of feminism with respect to safety. She wanted to talk about with respect to equality and with respect to happiness. So early on in her opening, she controverts the accusation that Brian Shapiro had made in his opening about whether women that are being abused or abandoned, whether they had the right to divorce the man. And what Rachel cites is in the year 1900, there were over 55,000 divorces that were granted to women on the basis of abuse and abandonment and things of that nature. And she was talking about how it isn't that divorce is the problem. It's that no fault divorce is the problem. We're going ahead and letting people just get out of something that's supposed to be a lifelong commitment just willy-nilly, when in days of past, there were specific things that you were taking to the judge, like adultery, abuse, or abandonment, that would be something that would be a reasonable cause for the divorce. She talked about the highest risk for criminality being under the wing of single moms. She talked about the abuse rates between women that are cohabitating versus women that are married. And there's a substantial elevation in risk for women that are simply cohabitating versus those that are with a husband that loves and cares for them. She also talked about the weight of responsibility, which was this kind of idea about equality. So she used the fact that men carry disproportionate responsibilities still in society in terms of the dirtiest jobs, in terms of net tax payments. That's what she was alluding to when she talked about how single moms are the highest in terms of welfare spending. I think these are very reasonable things for her to bring up to support her side. And then finally, she ended up with unhappiness. And she was talking about how so many women are on antidepressants and that single parent households often lead to the most unhappy circumstances. So let's see, we got dial up. Brian is insane, did a bad job representing his side. Yeah, absolutely. No fault plus the house and alimony. Yeah, no fault. There's a lot of things that are going wrong in terms of how we have set up the system, where originally the thought process was there were a lot of guys that were working and women weren't working so much, so that the men had to go ahead and make sure that the wives were taken care of after the fact. But now that, you know, people are talking about equality and all that, women are still typically marrying up, which is why guys are typically the ones paying out alimony and child support and things of this nature. All right, so we went ahead and hit up opening statements on both sides. Let's go ahead and dig in some more.
Well, we will jump into the rebuttals. These are 5 minutes as well. Brian, I've got the timer set for you. The floor is all yours.
The word would be hypocrisy. Rachel just talked about abuse, divorce. I want to be very clear with what I'm about to say. It is normally not my business to talk about how many children you have, how many ex-husbands you have. But when you have somebody to my left who wants to tell other women how to live their lives, I'm going to bring this up, and I'm going to bring up some studies. Now, Rachel has 3 baby daddies. Why is that important? Well, Guzzo and Firstberg's study says that if you do have multiple baby daddies, family has higher stress, more likely to have more mental health issues. The things that you claim that you care so much about, I do as well. The Dorius study, lower income and families most likely in children have a lower education rate. The Rutgers study, you just talked about physical violence. The Rutgers study, which, by the way, these studies have just come out in the last couple of years. You could look it up if you would like on your phone. By the way, you want to go back to 50 years or 100 years ago, then why do you use a cell phone? I'm just curious. Why do you use a cell phone? You can laugh, but if you want to go back to the way things were 50 or 100 years ago, we were a slavery nation. Are we still a slavery nation now? Do you want to go back to slavery? Should black people be allowed to vote? I'd love you to answer those questions. But anyway, going back to that Rutgers study, if you have multiple baby daddies, there's a much higher rate. In fact, a 24% higher risk of physical violence and sex abuse. A Halpern study, among other studies, you're likely to be below the poverty line if you have multiple baby daddies. Now, you might tell me right now, and I would believe you, if you said, I got through it, my kids grew up to be great people, and I would say, I'm happy for you. I think that's great. But why is it okay for you, but not okay for them? Why is it okay for you to say, well, you know what, I made some, maybe you won't say it was a mistake. I don't know. I'll ask you. But why would it be okay for you hypothetically to say, I made some mistakes, but, you know, everything turned out okay. My kids turned out okay. Why can't other women use those same excuses if they have kids after 30 or if they want their own career? If you want.
Okay, so this is interesting. So he goes ahead and starts his opening inquiry with basically a personal attack against Rachel. And then he strawmans her position in terms of whether she wants to bring back slavery and things of that nature. He is right to point out the dangers associated with multiple baby daddies, right? But here's the issue. She's not putting the idea of having multiple baby daddies as an example to be emulated. She's not saying that that is the standard that should be the case, right? So what Brian is doing, he's making this terrible mistake early on in the debate by personally attacking Rachel. And I think the thought process is he's trying to go ahead and throw her off her game by trying to stir up her emotions. But what he fails to realize is that he is much more likely to get emotional based on his own track record. So far, he started with a straw man. He went for hypocrisy, but he's failing to land these things because he is not actually addressing the argument. Like Rachel never argued that multiple baby daddies is a good thing to be emulated and something to hold up as what should be the case. So all of this line of inquiry that he's doing is just bouncing off of her. Let's go ahead and hit up the comments right quick. Let's see. Janice says he'd want a stay-at-home wife, and if she's unhappy, stay anyway. And then she'd given up everything she's supposed to, nothing because she couldn't work because a man wouldn't let her. Okay. Who's that towards? I'm not sure what we're talking about here. I think you're trying to go ahead and say that stay-at-home moms are not great. I happen to love having a stay-at-home mom, and I take good care of my wife. And it's not a matter of she doesn't want to work. It's that we have compatible and complementary skill sets. So we're both operating in the things that we are best at. Let's see. We got dial-up. Janice, Mrs. Wilson does point out about the 6% of women simply aren't traditionally wired. Maybe you're one. Okay, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Let's see. Next up, dial-up says, you have to see how the oligarchy has used women working as a cudgel to attack everyone. 2 incomes cuts incomes in half. Look at home buying power. Exactly. So if you have twice as many people in the workforce, you have oversupply, and there's only so much demand for that labor. That makes a lot of sense. All right, next up. Let's see. Such a joke. Rachel dog walked him. Yep. That's what it looks like so far based on how he's addressing the arguments. So now women are forced into corporate slavery position in life. Is that liberation? No, not so much, because then they're having somebody else raise their kids. All right, let's go ahead and get back into this.
Want to be a stay-at-home mom with kids? I think that's great. Go ahead and do that. But if you want to be out there in the workforce and be a doctor or a lawyer, You should be allowed to do that too. And Bible thumpers shouldn't be telling you what you should or shouldn't do. That's exactly what you do, Rachel. So I'd like you to explain to this audience right now why it's okay for you to have 3 baby daddies, why it's okay for you to take those risks and those studies that I just mentioned for your kids, but why is it not okay for everybody else?
We will switch over to Rachel for her 5-minute rebuttal. Got the timer set for you, Rachel. The floor is all yours.
So what you just heard was amateur hour of somebody who does not know how to make an argument, somebody who doesn't know what a debate is or how to
Ad hominem
have a
attacks.
debate. You
Ad
can't
hominem
interrupt.
attack.
He can't hold himself for the first 10 seconds of her rebuttal. That's insane. All right, let's go ahead and get back in.
You can't.
Well, you can't interrupt during the
No.
Yep, go ahead.
Again, amateur hour. This is the person who did the ad hominem attacks. He didn't present an argument. He just said, "What about you?" He used a tu quoque fallacy. What about you, though? This debate has nothing to do with my life or your life or
Yes,
my
it does.
personal life or your personal life.
Okay.
Control yourself.
Once again, Brian cannot control himself because he knows that she is right, that she went ahead and called him out on his logical fallacies for his opener.
Yeah.
Sean, please mute Brian.
Staggering lack of self-control. So again, another fallacy, a straw man fallacy. My argument was not that I can tell women what to do. My whole entire opening was just explaining what has happened to society in general, going over data. There was no condemnation of working mothers. There was no condemnation of women who need to leave abusive relationships like I did. There was no, we need to go back to slavery, which was 50 years ago, I guess. Again, not sure how this person is employed in media. But all that aside, he did not address any of the arguments I made, which were that, actually what he did was support my arguments by saying, yeah, when families are broken up, it's bad for kids. When we see divorce, rampant divorce, children raised in single household families, it's bad for kids. Yes, it is. Now, if everyone was only getting divorced in instances of abuse or abandonment, we would see divorce rates much closer to numbers that we had prior to no fault. You would see, if you look at surveys, the reasons for divorce, things like legitimate physical abuse are very far down on the list. They're usually like 4th or 5th. The number one reason is irreconcilable differences. I fell out of love. Mr. Johnson down the street makes me feel sexy. I need to find myself. And the kids are resilient and they'll get over it. What I'm against is this frivolous breaking down of families to chase personal happiness. The kids don't get over it. We have massive studies on what happens to children after divorce. And as Brian brilliantly laid out, it's very bad for kids. We see the worst outcomes for children coming from broken homes. So the argument is not no one can get divorced. The argument is divorce should only be permitted for very good reasons. That was the historic norm for the church. I'm not saying that women can't work outside the home ever. I'm saying that mothers already have a full-time job and that pushing them to work outside the home, creating the 2-income trap that's been laid for us by feminism, reduced women's choices. It didn't give us more choices. There was never a time when women were not allowed to work. It just wasn't the norm because women already had a full-time job, especially prior to the birth control pill in 1965, when most women had an average of 3 to 7 kids, depending on what time frame you're looking at. That's a full-time job. It didn't make sense to send women out to do men's jobs. It didn't make any sense to push them outside the home and force them to work. And now women like me who want to stay home struggle and find that they can't and find that they have to work when all they really want to do is be at home raising their own children, and they're forced to try to outsource that, which is why most women only have 1 or 2 children anymore. You can't afford to put 5 kids in daycare. So we have very small families, we have lower birth rates, and we have unhappier women who are now trapped in a different set of bad circumstances with abusive cohabitating partners instead of a husband who loves them and takes care of them. We're trapped in this 2-income trap. We have women who are trying to juggle everything and balance everything and are struggling to do that, and they're reporting higher levels of anxiety and depression. I'm not here to condemn women. Brian's here to condemn me personally, apparently, which is the actual ad hom argument. If he had an actual argument rather than just pointing at me, that would be fine. But if all he's here to do is say, well, but you got divorced because you were in an abusive marriage, that's actually not an argument. It supports my argument that you should be able to get out of abusive marriages, and you were. You were actually able to get out of abusive marriages prior to no fault. No fault means you don't need a reason, and the other party does not have to agree. And that's where I think that we went wrong.
Thank you very much for that rebuttal.
All right, so that's really interesting. So basically, all Rachel did was point out that he just made personal attacks, and that basically the arguments that he had put out about multiple baby daddies went to support Rachel's actual argument in the first place. So he really didn't think through his line of attack on here. Is he thought that he was going to go ahead and score emotional points by trying to knock her off her game, but he failed to recognize that if you were looking at his arguments in the context of the debate as a whole, that he's actually arguing against his own position, which is insane. But hey, that Rachel did a really good job of turning it around and using it as a buffer to her own set of argument. You know, she went ahead and brought up the idea of the 2-income trap. She went ahead and brought up how, hey, putting 5 kids in daycare is ridiculous. And then Rachel was busy making societal claims, whereas Brian was focused on Rachel's personal circumstances and then failing to land a proper argument. Let's go ahead and hit up the comments right quick. All right. Watch the debate. Why are they always arguing with books from the 1930s? Yeah, we're in 2026 for sure. He cries ad hominem, yet his entire beginning argument was, yep. Let's see. That's all Brian does in this whole debate. I'm interested to go ahead and see some more and watch him go ahead and just lose his mind, because I imagine that's going to be the case. And then here we go. Rachel puts her duties as wife, as mother first. And now that she has grown kids, she works for her husband. Great. And that's basically the deal with my wife and I is we've got our 4 kids and she is raising them up. And then she's got plenty of time afterwards to go ahead and do things. Chances are we're going to have grandkids by that point. And then we're going to go ahead and help out with our grandchildren. This is really cool stuff, and important for us to realize that there's time after children. Let's see. Enjoy your 20s. Don't have a kid until 30. Meanwhile, in a dark room. Yeah, we tricked him into having less family structure. Yeah, that's about right, dial up. It's just one of those things where when you go ahead and give your most fertile years to a corporate job and a corporate life, that there's consequences for that. Let's see. Penguin Prism. Howdy, Penguin. Feminism is one of the greatest moral victories for our country. I guess. I mean, if you're looking at it from the perspective of an emperor penguin looking to take over the United States, then sure, that's one thing. But I think that generally feminism has been a net negative for society. Let's see. It's the label and the Trojan horse for sure, Penguin. Yep, there we go. Men allowing the feminist ideology to become what it is the second bite of the apple. Yeah, I mean, there's something to that, right? Because if you go ahead and look at the garden, the serpent had tricked Eve. The serpent didn't trick Adam. Eve took of the fruit first. Adam just stood by there with her and just like watched it happen. So like he could have just slapped that apple out, or the fruit out of her hand, but he didn't. And allowing feminism to take root, a lot of ways has a lot to do with men sitting back and just letting it happen. Though, something to be sure, there were a lot of very rich and wealthy people that had caused feminism to be the thing in the first place. So that's something not to forget about it. Let's see. Anti-feminists only have biblical arguments. That's actually not the case. So far, Rachel has not made a biblical argument. She went ahead and made arguments in terms of safety, equality, and happiness. And she went ahead and used non-biblical arguments to support each of those. So I think that that's a mischaracterization of the argumentation being used. Let's see. First computer was an Apple with limited memory, 1 byte and everything crashed. That's so funny. All right, let's go ahead and dive back in.
From Rachel, we're going into the 40-minute crossfire or open dialogue. I'm going to trust you guys, but if there are interruptions, I do have to jump in and break it into 90-second responses. So handing it off to you. The floor is yours.
Well, first of all, for somebody that wants to stay home, you're certainly out a lot debating people. So I really don't understand that argument.
Well,
number
are you
one,
aware of the, well, let me
was that-
address that,
was that
since
10
this is the
seconds,
back
or
and forth.
Can I just
Well,
finish?
this is
'Cause
the
that
back and
was
forth.
like- I know, but that was like 10 seconds.
But you already got
just-
it wrong. So my
Okay,
children
well,
are,
you got everything wrong.
my children
got
are
everything
grown.
wrong.
No, I got everything right.
I know they're grown.
They're
Can I
grown
just
up
finish?
and out of the house.
Can I just finish?
So
Okay.
I've never
I
said
finish?
that women can't leave the house when their kids
Can I-
have grown up and left, and that
Okay.
they can't.
Do you believe
like,
women should be allowed to vote?
Do you think women are chained to the kitchen? Do you
I'm
think
asking you a
chained to
question.
the
Do you
kitchen?
think women should be allowed to vote?
I think it would be better if women and many other groups didn't vote. I would categorize women as one of the groups that should
Okay.
not.
Is
Yes.
there any other demo that shouldn't be allowed to vote, or is it just
Yeah,
women?
I think there's a lot of different ways that you could limit suffrage that would make everything a lot more fair and a lot more efficient. I think that if you're taking more from the system than you get, so that would be a great way to limit suffrage. You'd have to be a net zero taxpayer. You can't be taking more than you're getting. So if you're getting more in SNAP benefits and welfare
So
than
voting
you're paying,
should be based on how much you pay in taxes, or if you pay
it should
taxes?
be based on whether you are contributing to the system or not. If you're taking more than you're contributing, no, you shouldn't be having a voice in governance. You should also have to take a civics test, proving that you have some rudimentary understanding of how our government works.
A lot of people wouldn't vote for Donald Trump if that was the case. But anyway, so you don't think that?
So that's really interesting. So he goes ahead and asks a presuppositional question of her. He assumes that she's going to just limit it to women, and that's a poor assumption on his part. And so what Rachel does here is that she offers 3 separate ideas for how you would limit suffrage. One, net taxpayers. This makes sense. So the idea is if you are a taker from the system, then you have every incentive to keep voting for more benefits from the Treasury for yourself. And this is something that's been widely known and widely understood by various political leaders for the last 200, 300 years. Next, she doesn't say this, but she refers to the idea of the landed gentry. That used to be how voting was done at the beginning of the United States, was you had to have some skin in the game. That's another way that it makes sense for people to limit who gets to vote, because the idea is that if you have skin in the game, you are more likely to vote for things that are in the best interest of the common man and for everybody. And then she brought up the idea of civics and how a lot of people just have no idea how government works in the first place. And so if you have no idea how government works, why are you expressing an opinion on it? Like, just get an education on how government works, pass your test, then go get to vote. Very straightforward. Penguin, you're actually completely wrong on this. The idea of limiting suffrage inherently anti-constitutional? No, because the Constitution was originally written in a way where the landed gentry was the people that had the vote. So that is historically inaccurate. And it isn't until we had modern interpretations to go ahead and change things up, but we could easily change that with a constitutional amendment. And so when you amend the Constitution, bam, it's all of a sudden constitutional. We did that with the 14th Amendment to have the system that we have now, and the 19th Amendment. That's how it came to be in the first place. It isn't a matter of being anti-constitutional. We literally changed the Constitution to make it constitutional. All right, let's go ahead and continue.
Women should be allowed to vote. You don't think women should be allowed to vote? At least
Yeah,
if they're.
would you like me to explain why?
No, do you know why the birth rate is so low?
No, he doesn't want me to explain why. I will anyway.
I find it interesting that you want to take away one of the most fundamental rights of a woman, which is being able to vote. By the way, women are, I think you're aware, bringing children into this world.
Not enough.
Well, yeah. Why? Why is that? What's the number one reason why women aren't bringing children in?
Do you want to know like the actual correlate?
No, I want to know the
declining?
polls of the last 2 years, and women have asked, because I have the studies right in front of me right here. What is the number one reason, Rachel, why women aren't bringing kids into this world in the last 2 years? Do you know the reason for
I
that?
can tell you what the actual data says. The data says that the number one correlate to declining birth rates around the world in every culture, regardless of income or religion, is women's access to higher education and pushing them into the workforce.
Not true. So according to the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, which have been polled for the last 2 years, they've done it 8 times. The Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, I'll take their word over yours. They say the number one reason why women don't want to bring children into the world is something called the economy, Rachel. Now let's talk a little bit about the economy.
What's that?
Quick. Hold on. Let's talk a little bit about that. Rachel.
Okay.
Why are people losing their medical coverage? Why are people losing their food stamps? Is it because they're just lazy and they don't want to work?
Okay.
You see, because
we're doing another straw man argument
it's a straw man.
Yes, because
everything's a straw man argument.
I'll explain how you're wrong.
Yeah, I'll explain why you're wrong.
The only people who do have replacement birth rates are the poorest people. So if it was economics, we wouldn't see that the only people having children would be the poorest among us. And historically, everybody has had children during times of
so it's because of poor people.
Poverty.
You're saying the reason why is because poor people can't bring people into the world.
No, I'm saying listen very carefully and try to understand.
I'm listening.
The poor people are the ones having the babies. So the people who have the resources are opting out because they think their job is more important, because they want to take vacations, because they want to pay for a second vehicle
and a bigger mortgage. So when the people that aren't poor are polled and they're saying that the reason why they're not having kids is because of the economy.
It's because
are they lying?
They are prioritizing a higher material standard of living. Yes.
So what has changed then in
materialism?
The last? So
atheism and materialism.
Okay, so you think it's atheism?
It's
you
atheism
think it's
and
because they don't believe in God, and that's the reason why
they're prioritizing having stuff.
Right.
And having a career over having a family.
So what should we do about that? What do you think? Do you think taking away healthcare and
I think what we should do about that, I'll tell you what we should do about it is what I'm doing right now, what Andrew does all the time, which is explain why atheism is retarded and why you shouldn't hold to secular materialist worldviews that have no grounding, that have no fundamental basis for morality, and lead you into deaths of despair, and lead you into an anti-natalist position where you won't even reproduce yourself.
You know what? I think.
Okay, let's go ahead and hit up a couple of things that have gone on here. So when they're talking about the birth rates in the United States, and Brian Shapiro brings up a statistic from 2 years ago. In the United States, we haven't been at replacement level birth rates for well over 30 years. So when you just look at 2 years of data and you completely disregard the long decline that brings us to the most recent 2 years, it's ridiculous. So yeah, we have economic issues at hand, but yet the poorest among us that have the most economic issues are the ones having the most babies. So with those two pieces of information in mind, his argument was just completely destroyed. Yeah, he had a data set from 2 years, but it doesn't fundamentally address the actual problem in the room, because this problem has been existing for a lot longer. So that's just one of those things. Let's see. Let's address some of the comments. We got Yellow Pill Programmer. Hey, how's it going, man? Good to see you. Let's see. Mr. RTRT. Okay, so this is really important. So the guy is talking about how he's on government assistance. He thanks the taxpayers for helping him and his family, but doesn't think he has the right to vote. That makes a lot of sense, right? And that's honorable because you understand that you are a net drain on the system rather than a net contributor to the system. That's a really honorable position for you to hold. Let's see, Penguin. Yeah, we already addressed that the Constitution is a living document. I talked about it, how we amended it for the 14th and we amended it for the 19th. It could easily be re-amended to restore things like net taxpayer suffrage or restore landed gentry suffrage, both of which would go ahead and lead us to better outcomes, because then people that are actually contributing would be the ones that are making the decisions rather than people that are on the take, where they would just vote for more taking, which has historically been the case since we've had universal suffrage. Let's see. Chris, all we have to do is change the Constitution. Absolutely. Let's see. Because more people are having, let's see, intimacy on drugs and alcohol and have one night stand, and most women don't even have the name of the man they're sleeping with that night. Yeah, I mean, that just shows a lack of judgment on their part, right? Is they're not respecting the sanctity of the idea of intimacy in the first place, and they try to put all kinds of standards on guys after the fact, after they've had all their party years. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, watch the movie Idiocracy. It tells you all of this at the beginning of the movie. Absolutely. I remember that was one of my favorite movies. That's mockumentary, where the idea is that generally speaking, you've got the poorer and dumber people that are reproducing faster than the smarter people. It's part of the reason why I like the fact that I got 4 kids and I would have as many kids as I can have. That's just one of those things where I think that good parents should be the ones that are having more children. But I mean, like biology be biology, though. Let's see. The real win in life is being a great grandparent before 75. Yeah, that's true. Stance on the topic is rooted in selfishness that is weaponized by the oligarchy. You ignore the bigger picture. I think you're talking about Penguin in that one. Let's see. I'll play devil's advocate. Men are not living up to full potential of being a man of God. Agreed. I think that a lot of guys are not taking on their full responsibility. But at the same time, I think that for a lot of guys, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So people, if guys are being expected to go ahead and give more and more, but they're getting less and less in return, I think it is a logical choice for them to take a chill pill on that. So it's just one of those things. Let's see. Too bad Rachel hadn't brought up European countries. They all have social support and fertility rates are much worse than us. Yes. And not only that, but their socialism is further subsidized by the fact that they don't have their own national defense. For the most part, the United States is their national defense. Let's see. Yes, we're all coddled for sure, living in a fiction. Yeah, you're right, dial up. And then, but what feminist ideology has done to women is made them behave like men that they hate while calling it something else. Yeah, it's self-referential in a lot of ways. Cool, we're caught up on comments. Let's continue on.
You saying that makes you retarded. So first of all, to use that word and to call, no, it's not cool for her to use that word. To say that just because we don't believe in what you believe, that people are retarded. Because,
Bro, that's retarded.
Okay, good. So let me be very clear, okay? Everybody has the right to believe in what they believe in. Everybody has the right. You can be a Christian, you can be an atheist. To call people retarded because they don't believe in the religion that you believe in, or they don't believe in God, is so beyond absurd and bigoted in nature.
Retarded?
It's ridiculous.
Is that what you're saying?
It's ridiculous. No, I think you are. So what I was going to say,
do you have an argument?
what I was going to say, just be quiet. Make Andrew a sandwich and be quiet. So
that's pretty misogynistic.
20 million. Andrew, do you have a cigarette? Because I need one right now. So listen.
This man is crashing out. So he's spinning out of control on moral outrage because of the word retarded, right? And he is just beside himself just dealing with this. And then out of moral outrage, when Rachel calls him out, he goes ahead and just slaps her with some misogyny. It is insane. And so it's interesting how Penguin is going to go ahead and give Brian the benefit of the doubt, even though he used a misogynistic statement against Rachel because she disagrees with Rachel. Hilarious. You go ahead and you give him benefit of the doubt. It is insane. Well, the thing is, lefties are super happy to go ahead and give themselves and other lefties benefit of the doubt and want them to use the very tools that they don't like when the right uses. So they use moral indignation and they go ahead and they clutch their pearls as if that it actually matters. Let's go ahead and continue on. Let's see how much more he self-destructs.
I know it's got to be embarrassing getting your butt whipped by a housewife.
Yeah, you're kicking my butt, Rachel. Calling everybody retarded because they don't think like you is a wonderful argument to make. So 20 million people in this country have lost their health care because of what is in the big and beautiful bill. Millions of people have lost their food stamps. And while people that are sitting over there think it's funny that people in this country are struggling, living paycheck to paycheck, many of those people can't afford to have a child. And if they have multiple children, they have to work 2 jobs. They have to work 3 jobs. Now, what happens if a woman hasn't met the right man and she's in her 30s? What does she do there? What happens if a woman is a single woman trying to raise children? What is she supposed to do to raise those children? You know, the people who you support are against unemployment benefits, they're against maternity leave, and they're basically against every government program that would help that mother raise that child. These are the people that you support. So while you can call people retarded for simply not agreeing with your religious beliefs, you're mocking me for making arguments, and yet you want to insult everybody that disagrees with you. Let me be very clear. I support, wait, hold on, 10 seconds.
At some
10
point,
seconds.
I have to be able to
at some point you
respond.
will. Finish the sandwich. So the point that I was trying to make was I want everybody to believe in what you want to believe in. I'm not going to call you retarded because you don't want to be Christian, because you don't want to be Jewish. By the way, I'm not an atheist. I do believe that there is a higher power. I just don't consider myself an extremely religious person. I would never call you all retarded because you don't believe in the same religion that Rachel believes in. I don't live my life based on a book. You can. I choose not to. That doesn't make me retarded. It doesn't make you retarded. I know a lot of very intelligent people that do not believe in God. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It doesn't mean they're retarded. That is not an argument, Rachel. You're insulting millions and millions of people in this country that don't believe in what you believe in. Go ahead, Miss Retard, go ahead.
So that was...
So he's still going ahead and using misogyny. He's still going ahead and calling her retarded. He used the word retarded about 3 times more than she has as he's spazzing out on this. So he talks about, who lost or people losing healthcare and food stamps. A lot of that had to do with illegal immigrants and other forms of fraud, waste, and abuse. So he goes ahead and strawmans her argument by associating her with other people and not actually addressing any of the arguments that were made early on in this debate. He's just trying to go ahead and introduce anything he can in an attempt to gish gallop and like shotgun whatever he can to try to find something that sticks. Next up, he's talking about how he's wanting people to be able to believe in whatever and not call them retarded. But the thing is, Rachel didn't actually talk about religion being the thing. She was talking about worldview and how when you don't have grounding for your worldview or any like actual ethical grounding for your morality, it will devolve into preference. And preference-based morality just comes down to who's going to vote more for what. And so that's insane, because when you have a lot of people that are easily propagandized to vote for certain things, then you can go ahead and push almost anything with enough money. And when I think it's interesting how a lot of times people on the left will go ahead and talk about the Citizen United case and want to take all the money out of politics. But if you look at how much money is being spent on politics, it's interesting to see how the left spends disproportionately more in political spending than the right does. Very interesting stuff. Let's continue.
Yet another straw man ad hom, not an argument, because, and I'll explain why. You know how long the birth rate has been below replacement levels? Any idea?
I'm sorry, are you asking me a question?
Yes.
What was the question?
How long have birth rates been below replacement levels?
I'm going by the last 2 years, according to the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health.
Answer my question. How long have the birth rates been below replacement?
The data I have are the last 2 years.
Okay, he doesn't know, so I'll tell you.
So tell me.
It's been for about 50 years.
Okay.
So was Trump to blame for the birth rate being below replacement in the 1980s?
I didn't say that.
Okay, what caused it then? During the prosperity of the early 90s, when we had one of the best economies we've had,
I'll respond.
why was the birth rate below replacement then?
Sure. So I'll answer that, but I'll start by saying this. I don't know what's so funny. I have the study for the last 2 years. Now, I didn't bring up the study for why the birth rate was lower 50 years ago. And the reason why I didn't is in my opening monologue, what I told everybody is that I care about what's going on in this country.
But I disproved your point.
Now.
Yeah, what he fails to recognize is that he brought up 2 years of data, and with that 2 years of data, he extrapolated out the idea that it is the economy and there is like people feeling uncomfortable in terms of money, recently, as to why it is the case now. Now, Rachel goes ahead and looks back to 50 years and how we've not been in replacement rate breeding for over 50 years. And during that 50-year period of time, we've had economic booms and busts. And even during the booms, we had below replacement rate births. So that's kind of the thing, is she went ahead and she saw the argument for what it was, and she knew that the data did not support his argument. And so she used a wider aperture and showed where pieces of the puzzle that he's claiming fit in perfectly do not actually fit. So his claim was, it's the economy, stupid, is what he said, basically. And she went ahead and proved that throughout our history as a nation, over the last 50 years, we've had times where the economy has boomed. And even during those times, the birth rate was below replacement rate. So that blows up his argument, and he doesn't recognize that that's what the case is. So let's go ahead and watch him. Actually, let's go ahead and catch up on some chats. Let's see, what do we got here? Brian seems to have a very particular idea about what constitutes 10 seconds. Yeah, he has a very hard time with an internal clock. Let's see, waiting for him to bring up the Iranian war. Yeah, we'll see. Guarantee by the end of the debate, he's going to say Trump did it. Well, it's interesting because then she went ahead and just brought up that just now that isn't the case. TBH, she destroyed him with the boyfriend abuse statistics because abuse of the wife is half of the entire issue, meaning feminism saved women from abusive husbands. Yeah, that's not the case, it turns out. It turns out that it's abusive boyfriends and cohabitation that's really the cause of problems. Let's see. And now the efforts of feminism saving women has resulted in more abuse. That's true. More single parent households, less good outcomes for children. That's basically what this debate is about. That stat destroys so much. Happy feminists now? Insane. Yeah, not so much. All right. If you get your morals from yourself, then you're just a personal preference and they don't matter. That's true because you don't have any actual grounding for your morality and you're willing to go ahead and go with the flow. And I think that it is better off for you to have some actual grounding for why you think something is right or wrong in society. And for the most part, I think that people on the left, especially people in the atheist left, have a really hard time going really deep in terms of foundational beliefs as to what is right and what is wrong. Let's see. I'm not sure Brian Shapiro is a lefty on the best performance or the best performance. Well, he's arguing as if he's a lefty, right? So he is arguing in support of feminism, and feminism is generally a left-leaning topic. So he is positioned as the lefty, even though he seems kind of like a left-leaning libertarian. So thanks for that, Waffle. Good to see you. Let's see. Jimmy, the new $3 Trump sticker, apply to any gas pump, problem solved. Well, I think that that's just the case is when he came in, gas prices had lowered. And then now we obviously have a supply shock because we have issues going on with the Strait of Hormuz because we're in conflict with Iran. So it makes sense that if we have problems with getting gas here from the Middle East, that supply would dictate higher prices. It's just economics. Jimmy, how are the gas prices in Florida right now? I mean, in Texas, they're pretty decent. Let's see what we got here. I do not think birth rate is down because of lack of sex. No, that's an interesting thing because it's who is having the lack of intimacy is really the question. I think it's because the food we eat, most women can't carry babies because their bodies are so weak. You know, that's a part of it, but I think that a lot of it has to do with marriage. The age of first marriage is much higher today than it has been in times past. And so women are deferring their childbearing years till after they get educated, which is one of the very things that Rachel had brought up is that they were prioritizing their economic benefit and education over childbearing. Let's see, Florida. All right. Yeah. Across the country, they're much higher. Yes, obviously they're much higher right now during a supply shock. That's just how economics works. And then finally, we got dial-up saying, yeah, Vincent, we have a food industry that ignores health. We have a health industry that ignores food. Yeah, both sides of it is true. All right, let's go ahead and get back into this and watch him crash out some more, I'd imagine.
My point disproves your point.
What are you talking about?
You
It's
said
the economy
you
right
said,
now.
You said
right now.
yes. You said the reason women aren't
Right
having.
now.
Yeah, you
Right
said
now.
the reason is this.
Right.
I'm telling you, it's been this way for 50 years, so it can't be anything that's happened in
I
the
just
last 2
gave you
years.
why women are not having children.
Are you not
now.
able to follow logic?
Are you not able to listen to logic? I just told
That's not logic.
I just told you right now the reason why women aren't having kids now. Now I know you care about 50 years ago.
No, I'm talking about consistent.
Yeah, he is completely failing to see how his thesis for why things are going wrong in terms of the birth rate failed to land because that same rational thought process cannot be applied to the last 50 years that we've historically had below replacement level birth rates. And so he's spinning out of control because he can't contend with the argument. He's really better off just like letting this go and then moving on to something else. he would be much better off in terms of the argument.
Over
Okay,
time.
and right now, the number one reason is the economy. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. Why don't you pay attention?
What I'm
Why
trying to
don't you
explain
listen?
to you is that even in the 90s, when the economy was at its best, women were still not having more
And
than
times change and people change and women have different opinions.
What I'm
of why
telling
they're
you
doing
is
different things.
this disproves your theory.
No, it doesn't.
You can take one
No, it
survey.
doesn't.
What you have is one survey. How many people were asked the question in the survey?
I have it right here. 18,000.
18,000.
Yes, 18,000.
And they
John Hopkins.
Right. So you don't think that it could be the case that when they say it's the economy, they're not saying we're starving. They're saying, look, I want to go on a cruise every year. I want that second vehicle. I want a higher standard of living.
Wait,
And
hold on.
I
Let
would
me
prefer
get
to
this
have a
right.
job and work.
So the
I can
reason
have
why
stuff.
women aren't having kids is because they want to go on a cruise.
It's
That's
because
not
they
retarded.
want a higher material standard of living. And
Okay.
so
all right. How do you
now
know that?
well,
How do you know that?
you did this big long monologue, so now I'm going to do one. If you know anything about the economics of the last 50 years and the birth rates, you would know that prior to pushing women into the workforce in huge numbers in 1970, most women with school-age children stayed at home. Overwhelmingly, there was only like 6% of kids who had a mom that worked full-time. During that time, the economy fundamentally changed into a two-income economy where rather than just having the basics, where a janitor who's a father of 5 can support all those kids on one income and they can have a house in a nice neighborhood, they can have a car, they can afford groceries, and they can even afford to retire. Imagine such a thing, like the baby boomers did. When we pushed women into the economy in huge numbers, it did a couple of things. The first is it created that two-income trap, where now you don't have a family wage, you have an individual wage. And on top of that, we changed from being more of a productive economy to what my friend Aaron Clary calls a she economy. And this is more of a service-based, consumer-based, debt-based economy, where everybody is buying more than they can afford, they are financing everything, they are living well above their means, and it takes two incomes to keep this up. And this happened because we gave women a ton of free college. It wasn't really free. They had to pay it back. Women are now the majority debt holders. They have the most degrees, but they also go into life with an average of $50,000 in debt.
Are you against
So
student
yes,
debt forgiveness?
I'm not done yet.
Oh.
So yes, when you have a young woman who spends all of her formative years going to school, she doesn't graduate college till she's at least 22, maybe later. She's got $50,000 in debt starting out, and she has to start a career. Of course, she's going to say, I can't have a baby. I just started in life with debt and a career that I have to build. Otherwise, all this college I went to is for nothing. That's why I chose not to do it, because I wanted to have a family, and I thought it doesn't make sense for me to do things this way.
Yep.
And a lot of women want to do that and feel the social pressure that they cannot make that choice because everyone around them goes, you've got to have your own money. You can't depend on a man. That's scary. He'll abuse you and you'll have to leave and it's going to be awful. And we don't fearmonger women about, let's say a woman wants to be a dentist and we say, well, what happens if you get arthritis? What if you hurt your hand or lose your fingers in an accident? You can't rely on being a dentist. What if something happens?
All right, let me jump in here.
So
Let me-
it's not.
All right, let's go ahead and address a couple things. Let's see here. So Penguin goes ahead and brings up the fallacious argument about far more violent radical right wing than left wing. So here's the deal. The right doesn't typically have a problem calling out violent elements of itself. However, the left wing seems to have a really big problem with that. In fact, you have so many people. If you go ahead and take a look at social media after Charlie Kirk had been put away, so to speak, you'll see how much celebration was happening on the left. And he was a milquetoast Republican in a lot of ways. And so there's that. And then the next thing is you also have people on the radical left that are saying, good, the people on the right should be afraid. And they're just actively monetized. They're actively pushed. And it's insane to go ahead and see the difference and to see the cognitive dissonance typically on the left. All right, let's see. What else do we got here? Feminism means you have a choice. Stop lying. Yeah, that's true. You have absolutely should have your own money. You should never walk into a situation where you're relying upon someone solely and everything needs to be stupid. Yeah. So here's the thing. What's interesting is a lot of women are walking into relationships without skin in the game. And so back in the day, we used to have this thing called the dowry system, where the parents of the woman would go ahead and put in a substantial sum of money, especially if she was expected to go ahead and stay home and not work toward a family living. And then that dowry was often used to go ahead and get the business started and to get things going so that the family can be its own independent economic unit. We don't have that so much these days. And when you've got women that are getting married at 30 and they've got a lot of debt coming into the marriage, they're not bringing a whole lot to it, which is interesting. So when you've got women that are saying, oh, we need to get education so that we can go ahead and take care of ourselves. And then when they're 30 and they're looking to get married and you ask them about their financial status and you ask them for their balance sheet, and it turns out they went to education, they got in all this debt, and they don't have anything to show for that income that they've generated. They've just been using it for consumption. That's a problem, right? Because then it's like, what are we doing? You have delayed your birthing years for what? And very few people have like good answers to that question right now. Let's see. Penguin, are you the type to think Trump didn't condemn the white supremacists? Yeah. I mean, obviously that's the case. Dial up. Let's see. Why does the term independent registered voter, 40% of the country, never come out of a Republican's mouth? Probably because like independent registered voters are kind of a misnomer in a lot of ways if you go ahead and look into it. Let's see. Absolutely not right-wing or absolutely in denial about violence on their side. Absolutely left-wing, on the other hand, has no problem at all. Now, I think that you have a lot of people that are in the moderate left that have a really easy time saying that. But if you go ahead and talk to, or if you look at streamers like Hassan and Destiny, you know, people that are like at the top of their game for being on the left, you don't see those people decrying violence. You see people on the top of the right, however, decrying violence. That's the difference. Let's see. No one celebrated Charlie Kirk except stupid people. That's actually not true. It depends on how you see people as stupid. I mean, there's a lot of people that I would think are intelligent on the left, but not necessarily like good in terms of optics, celebrating Charlie Kirk. And even so, if we go ahead and go back to the idea of stupid people, well, these stupid people are voting. So that's the thing, is if we go ahead and trust them with the vote and we trust them with social media, then there you go. That's why we have a lot of silly things that we've got going on. Let's see. Check security precautions that a progressivist and conservative needs to give a public speech. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because generally speaking, if you've got somebody that's on the right doing a public event, they need a lot more protection than people on the left, generally speaking. That has been the case. Let's see. Right-wing violence has been more pervasive and worse than left-wing radical violence. Okay, so the studies behind that are absolutely tilted and biased. So if you go ahead and take a look at what are the things that they by default go ahead and state as right-wing, then you're going to go ahead and see a lot of differences there. And if you had the intellectual honesty to go ahead and take a look at it rather than parroting it, then you may have a different tune. All right. Wow, lots of back and forth. All right, let's go ahead and continue with the debate.
That, just to summarize, it's not that women are too poor. It's not that people are too poor. We still have a much higher standard of living than we've ever had historically. It's not that we can't afford children. It's that we fundamentally transformed the economics of the country, and people have different material standards that they want instead that they prioritize over family.
Okay, so I just repeat, she just said, it's not that women can't afford children. Rachel's in a situation where she has means and she has money. She doesn't speak for all the other women that were in this John Hopkins, where they all said that the number one reason was the economy. There could be all sorts of different reasons. I don't believe that the majority of these women said they're not having kids because they want to be able to go on a cruise. Okay,
They got to pay their college
I don't believe.
debt.
I'm not done yet. Okay, I don't believe that at all. She's making a gross assumption in assuming to form her argument that all these women are not having kids, and it's got nothing to do with any of the policies put forth right now. It's got nothing to do with the fact that they're living to paycheck, or they're single mothers who can't get maternity leave. It's got nothing to do with any of that stuff. But it's, forming her argument on that, which obviously I completely disagree. But she said something very interesting. It's the whole form of why I'm here today. She said she chose She chose to do things in her life. And I would never want to take that away from you, Rachel, but you want to take that away from other people. And then you'll say, that's a straw man argument. You've said in this debate thus far, what are we halfway through, that she doesn't believe that the majority of women should vote. She thinks it should be on the level of taxes.
I don't think the majority of men should vote either.
Okay. Well, that's a great argument, Rachel. That's a great argument.
It is a great argument.
Yeah. So you don't believe women should vote, and you don't believe a certain.
So that's really funny. So he's like claiming that she is crying straw man as if it's not true. Then he goes and straw mans her argument. And then when she clarifies the argument, he kind of brushes it off. It's insane.
Percentage of men should vote, but everybody should be allowed to have a gun, though, right? If you're not a felon.
Yes, exactly.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
You know why?
That makes a lot of sense.
I think the founders were correct about
the
suffrage.
founders had muskets, Rachel. We have AR-15s.
What does that have to do with
It
suffrage?
has a lot to do with
By
gun
the way,
control.
this is a guy who's never.
All right, so let's go ahead and address the muskets argument against the Second Amendment. This is really silly because if you go ahead and say that, oh, it only protects things that existed back then, that's like saying that freedom of speech only protects public speech and written letters and doesn't protect the internet. That's insane. So when you go ahead and apply a modernist lens to this idea, it crumbles very quickly.
Out a musket, because if he thinks muskets, I'm a firearms instructor, by the way.
So
if he
think
thinks
about that for a
muskets
moment.
are less
I want you
dangerous
guys
than
to
some of the
think it
guns
up.
we have
Hold on,
now,
Rachel,
he would
calm
be
down.
wrong.
Don't sprig out. Calm down. So the bottom line here is she wants to take away the rights.
He wants to take away your guns. He wants to take away your
gun
rights.
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Don't you let him take away your rights.
No, I don't. By the way, the people laughing right there, that's the Andrew Wilson circle jerk crew right over there. So I don't want to take away anybody. See, she's wrong. I don't want to take away anybody's right to own a gun as long as they're not a felon. I've never said that. By the way, as far as I know.
Then why did you throw that at me? Oh, you want everyone to have a gun?
I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. Because of how ridiculous her argument is.
Oh, I can't
She wants to take away the rights of people to vote, but yet those same people that are not, as you said, contributing to society, go ahead and buy 10 guns and thousands of rounds of ammunition. I don't want to take your right away, no matter how smart you are or how stupid you might be or how much money you're paying in taxes. I don't want to take your rights away. I'm pro First Amendment. Listen, I've never said that I want to take all of your guns away. And by the way, I can't think of one elected official on the left that said that either. Not that this is a gun control debate. I don't want to take your right away to vote either. Listen, I get frustrated sometimes and I say, man, I wish stupid people weren't allowed to vote. Man, I wish those people weren't allowed to vote. But would I want to put a law in place to take that right away from you? Of course not. Maybe I could agree with some sort of basic. I know I had a conversation with Vivek Ramaswamy about this, and I sort of agree with him that if you had some sort of basic civics test or something, I can't say I would be against that. Maybe we agree on that.
Great.
But the fundamental, if you're not making enough money or you're unemployed.
So that's really interesting because he admits that like the idea of a basic civics test may be a good idea. And I think that's true in a lot of ways because there's a lot of people that have no idea how our government works. And they have very loud opinions on both sides of the aisle, right? Both Republicans and Democrats, people on the left, people on the right have no clue as to how like government actually works. And then when he goes ahead and talks about how, she wants people to lose their right to vote, but then wants everybody to buy 10 guns and 10,000 rounds of ammo. What he fails to recognize is those very people that would not be qualified to vote under things like net taxpayer or landed gentry exemptions or landed gentry suffrage would be the same people that wouldn't be able to afford all of those guns and those rounds of ammo. But he doesn't understand that those are directly connected.
Or you're poor, that should be a factor in whether you should vote or not. I completely fundamentally disagree with that.
Okay, so you think that people who take from the Treasury and raid the Treasury, take the tax money of those who are producing, should be allowed to vote in huge numbers to take more from those people?
When you say take, please be specific. You talking about welfare, food stamps?
I'm talking about anyone who takes, I'm not saying poor people.
Yeah.
I was poor most of my life. But
so most of your life, you shouldn't have been allowed to vote?
I wasn't taking more from the system than I was getting. So if you're on SNAP benefits, you're on TANF, you're getting Medicaid, you're taking tens to maybe hundreds of thousands from the government in subsidies and welfare, then no, you don't get to vote to continually steal from other people.
What about
Yeah, so he failed to understand her argument where he went ahead and made it about poverty, where it's not necessarily about poverty. It's about whether you are contributing or whether you're taking. And sure, generally speaking, it's going to be people that are in poverty that are doing those things. But there's an argument that could be made that somebody in poverty could reject those subsidies and still retain their right to vote under a net taxpayer system. And I think that that would be an honorable thing, obviously. And so that would make sense why somebody would go ahead and retain their right to vote, because they're providing more than they're taking. And that's where Brian Shapiro fundamentally misunderstands the idea that is being put out here. You don't have to game the system just because you're poor. Exactly.
people that steal billions of dollars? Should they be allowed to vote?
They should go to prison if you can
What if
prove
they get
that.
a full pardon? Should they be allowed to vote?
Well, if you get a pardon, that's the
Yeah.
legal system. What do you
Gotcha.
want
Okay.
me to do about
So
it?
so
It's
if
going to be
you're
more Trump
so hold on.
derangement syndrome.
So if you're somebody that has stolen billions of dollars and you get a pardon, you should be allowed to vote. But if you're somebody that is struggling, maybe living paycheck to paycheck, maybe doesn't have a job, maybe doesn't have the opportunities that some other people have, you shouldn't be allowed to vote. I'm
Correct.
sorry, that is
Okay, let's
absurd.
Let's ask another
Absurd.
question here. So I'll make a deal with you. I'll say all the women can vote.
No, I will not have a beer with your husband.
Nobody wants to have a beer with
Okay,
you, dude.
good, good.
Okay,
Thank you.
so
Thank you. Good.
all the
That's a
women,
relief.
all the women can vote if they have to sign up for the draft when they turn 18, like
Let's
the men.
talk about the draft. I'm
Yeah,
happy to
let's.
do that with you.
Okay.
So here's my opinion on the draft.
So that's really interesting. So that's like one of the fundamental differences between men and women in terms of their eligibility to vote, because we know that in the United States, once you turn 18 as a man, you are compelled by law to sign up for the selective service. And if you don't, that there are actual penalties up to $250,000 fine, and that there is issues where you can't get federal student loans, you can't get an SBA loan. There's a lot of federal programs that you don't qualify for as a man if you're not signed up for selective service. And none of those restrictions apply to women because they're not compelled by force of law to sign up for selective service. So interesting.
Right. And here's my opinion on women, and I'm glad you brought that up. I believe that there should be a basic physical standard that both men and women need to pass. And because while I think we all could agree in this room, on average, right, a man is physically stronger than a woman on average. That doesn't mean that there aren't women out there that are pretty strong. So my opinion is pretty simple on this. If you can pass that basic physical standard that a man and a woman would have to pass, and they're willing to risk their life for this country.
You're talking about voluntary service. No one is barring women from the military, dude. We're
What's
talking
your opinion
about
on
the
that?
draft.
Should women be able to go to war? Should women be able to be there?
I asked you a question about the draft. Let's stick to my
Okay,
question
you don't
rather
want to
than
answer mine?
switching.
Okay.
I think that if women want the same rights as men, they should have to. If we want equality, let's have equality. I'll believe women want equality when they demand to sign up for the selective service, when they demand to be part of the industries where 92% of the workplace deaths are compromised by men, when they're doing 90% of the essential infrastructure work. That's equality. Equality is not a system where men do everything dirty, dangerous, and difficult. They die for the country. They die on the job. They die to defend the borders.
How many women have died
and
from
women-
childbirth since the early 70s?
Oh.
So this is an interesting point. So back in the day, if you were voting, you would be part of the militia in some way, and that you would be responsible as part of the landed gentry to go to war if the need were to arise. Many of the politicians in the Revolutionary War and beyond had some stake as officers in the army or the Navy. So it's interesting because when we go ahead and talk about politicians who vote for war need to send their children, obviously. So then when we go ahead and say the correlate would be politicians who vote for social welfare should pay for all of it. Like, it's just a nonsensical argument. If we're talking about society-wide responsibilities and society-wide costs, which is something that the left is very on board for, then you understand that that argument makes no sense. All right, let's move on.
Oh, I'm glad that you asked. Not nearly as many as men.
How many?
Let me see if I have it in my notes. It's a very small number.
You think over 30,000 people is a very small number?
That's not what I had
That's
here.
what I have. Since the early 70s, over 30,000.
Oh, since the early 70s. Okay. How many men have died in workplace jobs since the early 70s?
I don't have those stats in
Well,
front of me. I
let's look
imagine
it
a
up.
lot of men have died in
More
workplace
than
jobs.
have died in
Sure.
childbirth, by far.
I don't deny
If you
that.
combine wars, so we're talking about voluntary versus involuntary. Nobody
Right.
is
I
forcing
understand
women. Nobody's forcing women to have children. We are forcing men
You don't?
to sign up for the draft, and we are forcing men to do everything that makes these lights, this live stream, these microphones possible.
So
Women do not build and maintain society. That's men.
So because women aren't forced to have kids, you don't think that's a sacrifice when they do have kids? When they make that decision?
When a man signs up for voluntary military service, yes, he is choosing to sacrifice. We commend
Three women
him.
just came home in caskets from Iran. You're aware of
Anyone
that, right?
who volunteers for either childbirth or military service and dies is doing a great selfless thing. That's not what we're talking about, buddy. You got to try to stick with the argument.
I understand that.
We're talking about what men are compelled to do and what are women compelled to do on behalf of society that might kill them.
You know, I don't think women are forced per se to do anything, but what you are making the argument with us today is you're making the argument that women should be at home and be stay-at-home mothers and they shouldn't be out there in the workplace.
Did I say that?
Oh, so tell me that then. Tell me your opinion on women in the workplace. Do you believe that women should have the same opportunities as men in the workplace?
Yes, and they do. But what I will say, yes, they do.
What's the average pay for a woman and a man with the same job?
The wage gap reduces to about 3% when you take into account the fact that women choose easier, lower paying jobs, easier, lower paying degrees than men on average, and take much more time off and much more time away from work.
This is the problem with this argument.
This is really interesting. So he goes ahead and brings up the wage gap that's been long debunked, and she provides the coloring for how the difference between how the wage gap is calculated, where it's just if you take all the income of all men and against the income of all women and make a direct comparison, that's how you end up with the 78 cents on the dollar number. However, when you go ahead and correct for positions, for time in industry, for hours worked and things of that nature, the wage gap virtually disappears. So it's just one of those things. It's insane. But because it is technically the case, if you go ahead and get rid of all the things that make it the case, let's just go ahead and talk about what is and never mind what the reasons are. And that's usually how things are divided up in this piece of the debate.
Skipping ahead, and you didn't let me finish the point here. We're talking about how men are forced and compelled to possibly go to war and die, and we have no such responsibility for women. No one's forcing women to do anything to defend the country. No one's forcing women to go work a job that could kill them.
We don't have have civilization without women bearing children.
We don't have
civilization without
men building
I understand that they're not forced to. Why
do men have to sign up for selective service at age 18? Or do you know what happens to them if they don't? They get in big trouble, don't they?
Why.
And they lose rights, don't they?
Here's why. As I said earlier.
This is interesting. First of all, hey, how's it going, Don DeMarco? Good to see you. Next. So this is going into the differences between the ideas of rights and duties and how, as a society, we are very quick to put duties and responsibilities and burdens on men. And generally speaking, we do not do those same things for women. Because if we talk about the duties that are associated with men generally to provide and protect and preside, we don't have a corresponding duty that we put on women. So when people go ahead and say, oh yeah, but women go ahead and give birth. Sure. But because we're below replacement rate for birth in the United States, we can see that they're not actually taking that on. If they were taking that on as an actual responsibility, then we'd see people having at least 3 children. That's not the case. So women, generally speaking, do not take on obligations in society, but they expect for men to take on a disproportionate amount of responsibility in our society. Let's continue.
Women, as a whole, are not as physically enabled as men on average.
Right.
On average. That is why I said, and I'll repeat it again, I wouldn't have a problem with that if they both pass the same physical
You're
standard.
not addressing my question.
I'm completely addressing your question. I never
Do
said that
men
women
have
have
to
to
Do
sign
men
up. I
have
never
to
said
pass
that.
a physical test to sign up for the draft?
I
No,
never
they
I
don't.
never made that claim.
So we're
I'm giving
talking
you,
about the draft. Stick to the draft.
I understand what we are
You're
talking
about when people go sign up for military service and go to boot camp. I'm not talking about that.
Well, that's the argument that I'm making. I'm making because you're.
That doesn't address the question. The
I
question
never
is,
made the
if
claim.
if men and women are equal, why is
Whoa,
there
whoa, whoa,
a
whoa.
standard
Okay,
for
hold on,
men
hold
that
on.
there is not
Okay,
for
so
women?
Men and women are equal. As I've said before, there are attributes that women have that are stronger than men. There are attributes that
Yes, we
men
know
have
men
that are
and
stronger
women
than
are
women.
different.
I never said as a whole, with every job, men and women are equal. I'm not making that argument. The argument of this entire debate here is the point that I'm trying to make is that I don't want to interfere in other people's lives.
That's really cute. That's so virtuous of you. It has nothing to do with anything.
Well, I think it has.
I don't want to tell anyone what to do.
She doesn't want
Has
women to
nothing
vote. She
to
thinks
do.
women should be second-class citizens. Tell me you haven't said that.
I have not said that women should be second
You've
class.
never.
So he's once again failing to land a proper argument. So he once again mischaracterized her argument about voting. She didn't say only women shouldn't vote. She said that most people shouldn't be voting. I happen to agree with her that most people shouldn't be voting because they have no idea what in the world is going on, and they don't have the systemic understanding of how things work in society to make accurate assessments of what should and should not be the case in society.
Said that in any debate on the record.
You think I've said women should be second class citizens?
You've never said that?
No. Maybe
Not-
as a joke.
Oh, maybe as a joke. Okay.
I say a lot of stuff.
It was
as
just a
jokes.
joke. It was locker room
Tell
talk.
me when I said that.
I heard you in a debate
Oh,
say
you
that
heard me?
you said women should be second class. Now, are you saying you were joking?
I don't ever remember saying
You don't
women
remember.
should be
Okay.
second class
Okay.
citizens.
You don't remember. Okay. You don't
What
remember.
debate was it?
I think that's interesting.
I think you're lying. What debate was it?
I think you're lying.
What debate was it?
Was it a joke?
Who was I debating?
I'll look it up. Was it a joke?
You're lying.
Yeah, so he goes ahead and tries to use a smear against her, and then doesn't have the information to back it up. So that's a fundamental issue that we've got here right now.
I didn't say that.
As when I was doing
Do
debate
you have
prep,
proof or not?
when I was doing debate
Do
prep,
you have proof or not?
I will provide you the proof.
Okay.
So you're saying you never
Provide-
said that?
No, I never said that.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
I'll look it up.
So back to the draft. Why is it that men have to sign up for the selective service or risk losing their voting rights and even their freedom, but women don't? Why?
Well, I just gave you the answer. As a
Because-
whole, in general.
So men and women are different. and they serve
When
different
did I say
purposes.
that they were exactly the
I'm
same?
not
That would
saying
be
you
the most
did.
ridiculous
I'm
thing.
saying,
I never said that.
Why should women have the exact same political power as men when, as the anti-suffrage women brilliantly argued, they said, look, the purpose of government is to protect persons and property. That's the function
So the
of
argument
government.
is because
and women
when we're
cannot
born,
do that.
when we're born, as on average, as I've said, men might be on average stronger than women. Because of that premise, and they have to sign up, women shouldn't be allowed to vote. I completely disagree with that premise. And it goes-
Why?
why?
What's
It's
your
because
argument? I haven't heard an argument. I've just heard you go, oh, I can't believe what she's.
Yeah, so she's correctly pointing out that he's expressing moral outrage and not actually putting forth an argument that is grounded as to why women or why people in general should by default be enfranchised to vote. Like, in terms of not what is the descriptive reality, but why it should be the prescriptive reality. Why should it be the case? So Rachel is putting out the beginnings of an argument called force doctrine, which is something that her husband had pioneered, saying that generally speaking, men are the ones that provide the enforcement of law in the world writ large. And if you don't believe that, you can go ahead and take a look at sections of the world where men have decided that women don't have rights. They just don't have rights. You can look at Afghanistan and a lot of places in half the world, honestly, that is the case. Now, what is failed to be realized on Brian's part is that the reason why many people have the rights that they do is because men have allowed it to be the case. That's just what it is. Right, wrong, or indifferent it doesn't necessarily make right. Continuing on.
Can you believe what she's saying? She called people a word. She said women should be second-class citizens. She wants to take away your rights.
I think if
No
you're not
argument.
a Christian, you're retarded. That's my
I
impersonation
think
of
you should give me an argument.
Okay, well, bad impersonation. Okay, bad impersonation. I never
I don't
said
have a stupid hat.
bad impersonation. Okay, all right.
Now give me the argument, please.
That was funny.
Do you really want to go there?
I want you to
You want to go to
an
personal
argument.
physical attributes?
I want you to give me an argument.
Is that what you're going to do?
I mean, do you want to have a modeling contest, Brian? I don't think you're going to win.
Okay, I don't think you're going to win either.
Fair enough. Now
Yeah.
give me an argument. Tell me why.
I've
Tell me
already,
how we're supposed to have equality between the sexes when one is expected to die
I will
on
tell
behalf
you
of
why.
the other. Okay, tell
and
me.
I've tried to explain this to you. Okay, women have certain things that they are better than men at. Women have certain responsibilities, like bearing children, if they decide to have
If
children.
they want
The
to.
argument that you're making is, well, it's a choice for a woman to have a child. Okay, yes, it is a choice. I understand that. But still, my point being is that just because women don't have to sign up for the draft shouldn't be a reasoning why women should not be allowed to vote. Let me ask you, and I'm
You
going to
just
go.
restated the position. You did not give me an argument.
So let me ask you a question. then.
Why? What would be
Because
the
women
differentiator?
don't have to sign up for the draft. I know. Look here. Look at your husband for.
He's
for
so
advice. I know
handsome.
he's-
What's interesting is she is pressing him for an actual argument, and he is not providing one. He just restated the thing. So that's like saying that water is wet. It's like, okay, yes. But why is water wet? Well, because it's water. It's circular in its nature. So if she's challenging him as far as why should there be equality in terms of political stature, but he's failing to recognize that he needs to deal with his presuppositions that are happening beyond or in his thinking and provide an actual argument as to why they should be enfranchised at the same level for the same reasons. And Rachel had put out an argument because they're not taking on an equivalent amount of responsibility in society. And he doesn't have anything yet that's counteracting that.
So
Can't help
smiling.
it.
I know. By the way, this is. I want
It's
to go
rough
there.
looking
I won't
this
even go
way.
there.
I want to take a break and look this
Yeah.
way.
I will say this.
Now, if you
since
can
she
give
wants
me
to
a-
get,
if you can give me
since
an
she wants to get
argument.
personal with me because she's been doing that.
He doesn't want to have to actually give an argument. All he just did, by
An
the
argument.
way, was restate the position.
You're insulting
I
my
don't
physical
think-
appearance.
He said, I don't
You've
think
called
they
people
should
retarded
because I
for not
don't
agreeing
think
with
they
you.
should.
And
You have an
you're
argument?
talking to me about forming an argument.
Yes.
You've called millions of people
All you
retarded that
have-
don't agree
yes,
with you.
you're very
And now you're
outraged.
talking to us
You're
about
very
how
offended.
handsome your husband is.
He is.
You couldn't be more insecure.
He's so handsome.
I will say this though, the
Look
other
at him,
day
he's so cute.
when we had our little, kind of funny, we had our little Twitter spat. She spent all day trying to convince strangers how hot her husband was.
So once again, he is completely deflecting. So he is basically just restating an argument, and rather than actually answering the question or providing an argument as to why it should be the case, one, he just states that it should be the case because it should be the case. Once again, that doesn't actually help. And then secondly, he is just going on this wild goose chase because he can't stay on topic.
Little strange.
Woo!
Little
Look
strange.
at him. Yeah.
Little strange. Listen, I think if you're in a healthy relationship, you should think your husband is hot. If you're married to a woman, you should think your wife is hot. I just think it's a little weird trying to explain to thousands of complete strangers, trying to convince them that your husband is hot. I don't know, it's a little weird.
Now, rather than
It's a little
you-
strange. That's
now,
all. It's a little
rather
weird.
than you restating your position of I just don't think so. Tell me why
I've
women
told
shouldn't.
you
No, you just
over-
restated the position.
No, I've
That's all
told you.
did.
You're
said
not, Rachel,
they
you're not
shouldn't because
listening.
They shouldn't.
Rachel, you're not listening.
I'm listening. You're not thinking.
You're right. No, I'm thinking
No.
you're not listening. Okay.
Simply restating
So-
the position is
So,
not an argument.
Rachel, I'm not stating the
You-
position
you did.
over.
You
I'm
said,
giving you
"I
my
don't think that-"
opinion
Okay,
on
try
what we are
again.
discussing.
Try
okay?
again.
I've already tried. You're not paying attention. So I'll say it again. Okay. There is no question that there are sacrifices that men have to make that women don't have to make, like being in the draft.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Okay.
However, there are sacrifices that women have to
Like
make
what?
that, like bearing children.
He failed to put forth an equivalent duty that women have. So he is saying that women have to bear children, but we know that statistically speaking, that is incorrect because if they had to, they would be. but they have choices in the matter. Thankfully, it's a good thing that they have choices, but they are choosing something outside of what he claims is a duty. There's a difference between biological realities and duties that are impressed upon you by color and force of law. And he fails to recognize this.
And
But
being
that's-
pregnant and having
but
kids.
that's
I never said they had to
That's
do
a
it.
category error.
I never said they had to do
Let
it.
me help this man with another logical
There we go
fallacy. It's
again.
called a category error. We are talking about an involuntary thing, which people are compelled by the government to do, versus a completely
Okay.
voluntary
Well, we're going to
thing
agree to
that nobody
disagree.
even dares
We're going to agree
tell
to
women
disagree on that. Do
do.
you think women are bad in the government?
Hold on. There's no agree to disagree. Like, she's pointing out a category error where we're talking about how one duty is compelled by color of law, so it is mandatory, against a responsibility that is voluntary by its very nature, especially considering how we have this plethora of birth control that's available in the United States and throughout most of the Western world. So his category error is associating the voluntary against the compelled. And he is trying to run away from it and agree to disagree because he fails to realize the trap that he fell into. He really should make a better argument than to go ahead and make that equivocation there that is false. He'd have a better position from a leftist perspective that universal suffrage is better in the event of describing universal human dignity. And then she'd have to dig into that. And then they would have more back and forth. But because he went ahead and used that argument, he put himself into an alley with no exit, basically. So he should just give up this point and move to a different point, make a better argument.
Do you think they're bad representing in government? Because you said that in your book, right? You think women
I
are bad?
don't think women should be in
Mhm.
politics, no.
You
But
don't?
you still haven't given me an argument
Well,
for,
I mean, we can beat a
why-
dead horse, but I'd like to move on to another topic. Do you
I'm
think,
sure you would
do you
because
think women
had,
are bad?
I
No,
just
because
won
we
that
only, how
point.
much time do we have left in this debate? There's a lot of other things that we should be discussing. Yeah, exactly. 10 minutes more. You think women are bad in government, right? You don't think they should be in government. You don't think
Right.
they should be politicians, right?
Yes,
Why
correct.
is that? Why do you think that way?
Because the purpose of government is for the protection of people and property, and women
Good.
are not able to accomplish that. Women, there's a
Yep.
reason, by the way, that
Yep.
historically women couldn't own property. It's because they can't defend it. So as a
Yep.
woman, if I owned like 100 acres of
Mhm.
land in 1845, how am I going to protect it
Yep.
from bandits, from marauders, from people
I
who
hate to
want to
break
just
it
come
to
and steal
Rachel,
it?
but
I would need, you asked me a question, so I'm answering.
yeah,
I
lady.
would need men to do that on my behalf.
Mm.
I think the reason that we shouldn't have women in government is because men are the only people who can defend the borders, who can enforce the law.
Mhm.
We've seen what happens when you try to put female law enforcement officers on the
Mhm.
streets and on the border. It doesn't work
Yeah.
out very well. We need men and we rely on them to protect persons and property.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Therefore, that's the task of
Let's
men,
talk
not
about
of women.
protecting. Let's talk.
So that's interesting. Okay, so she goes ahead and puts out the idea of basically forced doctrine that women had a hard time protecting their own property, which is true. That is actually the case because we didn't have in the 1850s this like broad law enforcement set of agencies in municipalities and at a state level and federally speaking that would go ahead and handle individual property concerns. That is really more of an artifact of our modern era, where in modern cities we have people and in modern counties we have sheriffs and things of that nature to protect property. So the protection of one's property is outsourced to government agencies rather than it being a fundamental responsibility of the property holder and the property owner in the first place. Let's go ahead and address this real quick. So Rhonda McKnight, hey, so she's a single, happy, childless woman. Great on you. Glad that that's the case for you. I made financial arrangements for my old age. Mom has 4 adult kids. She's state funded with memory care. Great. So here's the thing. That is an individual case, and this is a failure to recognize that your individual circumstances are not something that you can go ahead and put on the society writ large. And while you in your own personal circumstances, you've managed to do something, you're managed to be happy, that is not necessarily the case for your sisters. The vast majority of women that are single in old age, they show that when they are surveyed for what their happiness is, if they said that they're unhappy, missing out on having a legacy is one of the highest indicated causes for that kind of distress for them. So while I am very happy that things went well for you, that isn't necessarily the case for everybody in society. Let's move on.
Talk about COVID for a moment. Female leaders.
Yeah, let's. COVID. Okay, sure. Tell me how
Why are
this
you
is gonna-
laughing at
'cause
COVID? Millions of people died of
It
COVID.
had better tie back to feminism.
Why are you
Because
laughing?
we're debating feminism, and
You think
you're
COVID's
bringing up.
funny?
I think it has nothing to do with feminism.
Okay, well, why don't you shut up and let me finish and make him a sandwich again and
Are
let
you
me finish.
mad? Are you
No,
getting a
you're
little
just
emotional?
respect. I'm trying to make a point. I let you talk. Be quiet. Let me talk. There's a reason why I'm bringing this up. You
You're
said
turning
women.
red.
You said women shouldn't be in government positions.
Yes, correct.
I am telling you, during COVID, female leaders were far more successful than men in dealing with COVID. Globally, women only held 7% of leadership positions. 4 of the top 10 countries that were run by women, and in this study, the death rates, 13 countries led by men, 8 led by women, the male per capita, 214 deaths per million that were led by men. Led by women, 36 people per million. Look, you could look up that stat. Now, why? You could say maybe.
Okay, so that's a really convoluted point that he's trying to make. So he is looking at female leadership and then taking a look at COVID and looking at the death statistics for various countries and looking at it strictly from the perspective of whether women are in charge or whether men are in charge, without taking a look at the difference between looking at whether there is socialized medicine involved, whether there are other factors that are involved in this. But he's looking strictly at male leadership versus female leadership. So I think that in a lot of ways, he's going to run into another category error. Let's see what he's got to say.
It was ego. You could say maybe it was bad policy. You could say maybe it wasn't listening to experts. Whatever the case may be, the women that were in power in these countries led to 36 people dying per million. By the men, 214 deaths per million. So if your premise is that men should be in power in these positions and women shouldn't, then what is your explanation there? Because if women weren't in power, more people would have died.
Do you believe in freedom and liberty?
I think I've made that pretty clear.
Okay, well, the reason for those statistics is that women were notoriously tyrannical, like the Prime Minister of New Zealand locked down New Zealand tighter than a prison camp. And the fastest way to get rid of liberty and freedom is to put women in charge of the government, because they overwhelmingly bring in tyrannical welfare
I just gave you the
states,
stats of how they save lives.
Yes, by locking down their countries, by
They
not letting
saved
people go to work,
lives.
by shutting down businesses, by forcing people to take vaccines.
So first of all,
You think forced vaccination
First
is
of all,
freedom?
I find it repugnant that people in this crowd are laughing at the fact that less people died because maybe you couldn't go to the mall, okay? I find that despicable, number one.
You were
Number
one of those
two-
people chasing people around with masks.
No,
weren't you?
actually, I was
Yeah.
one of those people that almost died of COVID. I was in the
How-
ICU. Hold on a second. I was in the ICU for 2 weeks. I saw people die around me. And the last breaths
very
that,
sad.
and the last, no, it is sad.
How do you feel
and the
about
last breaths,
forced
and the last
vaccination?
breaths that
Yes,
some of
the
those
last
people
breaths.
made,
So much drama.
they didn't think that COVID was real. The reason why this is a personal topic to me is because I almost died from it. And I would imagine, sadly, I wish this wasn't the case, I would imagine a lot of people in this room know people that died of COVID. It was horrible. I don't want innocent people to die. Of course, I want people to have their freedoms. Of course, I want people to go out and be able to live their lives. The only point that I was trying to make was that women that were in these positions during that time, during COVID, saved lives, and they did a better job than men. Now, if you think,
But he failed to address like what actually happened in here. Is he didn't go ahead and express whether there's policy differences, what were the actual things that women did to cause this. He's just using a study that just looks at whether women were in charge or whether men were in charge. It doesn't actually look at the actual policy differences and whether those policy differences are mirrored in all localities that had similar death or survival rates. And because he is failing to go into that depth, because he can't, honestly, because the study doesn't account for that, I think that he's just making a category error here and causing causing himself problems where he's saying that women are just better leaders is the point he's trying to make. But this specific evidence that he's using to support that point is not really a great way of doing that.
They're woke and they shouldn't have closed everything should have been open. You're entitled to that opinion.
How do you
I
feel-
disagree with you.
How do you feel about forcing people to take
I've
experimental
always said
vaccines?
that I never felt like the vaccines should have been forced on anybody. I disagree with people
Well, that's
that
what,
said that.
That's what women did
Okay,
when they
but
were in charge.
but these
so.
women that were in charge of these countries, and by the way, that's not entirely factually accurate. So let me ask you a question. Do you want us to look like a third world country? Is that what you want?
No.
You don't want that. Okay.
Explain.
Well, let me ask.
Yeah, so he's setting up a false premise here, right? So he's making the assumption that if you go ahead and change something about a society, that automatically it's going to turn it into a third world nation, which is what he's going to try to set up here, is what it sounds like.
Ask you
Are
this.
we still talking about feminism, by the way?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes, we
Can
are.
you- can you
Because
bring it
when you
back and
take
land
an
the
entire
plane?
society and you say that women shouldn't vote, women shouldn't be doing these specific things. I don't want to look like
What specific things?
I don't want to
did I
look like
say?
Afghanistan. You are pushing.
I didn't say that.
You are pushing a narrative.
So it's either progressive liberal enlightenment or it's Sharia law in Afghanistan.
I didn't say that.
What?
Yeah, that's a false dichotomy. He didn't say that, but that's basically what he was alluding to. He's saying that if we go ahead and limit suffrage to based on anything, then all of a sudden we turn to a third world nation like Afghanistan. And none of that actually reflects any argumentation that Rachel had put out in this debate. She talked about net taxpayer as a way of limiting suffrage or arranging suffrage and having a qualifying civics test. Those are the two arguments that Rachel had put out. And Brian is having a hard time actually addressing those arguments. And instead, he is trying to straw man the argument and knock over the straw man.
Do you think Western
say that.
culture looked like for all of its history?
Can you
Women
please-
can have plenty of liberty
We have like
and
5
not
minutes, right?
run the country.
Okay, about 5 minutes. 'Cause
Putting
for time,
some limits on
time
women is not
constraints.
the same
Rachel,
thing
we
as
only have
Sharia
5
law.
minutes, so time
Well, you've
constraints.
spent all the time
In your
talking
book-
about Trump
in your
and
book-
COVID and all kinds
Well,
of
yeah,
crazy
because
stuff.
I gave you examples of women in government
and
that I
you've
thought did
still
a good
not
job.
made a single compelling argument.
Actually, I did. They saved lives, and obviously you don't care about that. Did you say in your book that Miley Cyrus, Cardi B, Katy Perry, Beyonce, because they stick their tongue out, they're invoking some Hindu goddess and they hate men? Is that why they stick their tongue out?
They literally say in their songs
do.
they hate men. Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
You
they
talked about
literally
sticking.
say-
No, in your book you
Yes.
said because they stick their tongue out. You
Yeah.
think? Okay, can you please explain that to the? Because according to your theory, Gene Simmons must want to kill men too. When women stick their tongue out, could it just be possible that maybe they're just doing it because they enjoy it, or it's something
I
they
didn't.
do?
I said in the book,
Mhm.
whether they know it or not, this could be invoking forms of ancient goddess worship, and they do in their own songs talk about it. That's not.
So
really,
hold on. So because
that's not
Miley
really
Cyrus
pertinent.
sticks out her tongue,
What's interesting is that he didn't actually read the book. And she's talking about how a lot of modern feminism uses symbology and symbolism from the occult. And that's basically what the deal is with her book. And she goes ahead and aligns what early feminist practices had related to older occult rituals. And he finds this to be ridiculous, which is why he is trying to be snarky on her about this. Now, when their actual lyrics talk about hating men, she's right on the money as far as this is concerned. And he is trying to find something small to make big to insult her background on this. And I think that this is not going to land either. Let's see how it goes.
that must mean that they hate and they want to kill men.
I didn't say that.
In your book,
It
you were
doesn't
talking
say
about
that.
invoking the Hindu goddess
Let me
because they
ask
stick
you
their tongue
something.
out.
Did you read the book?
That must mean I want
That's-
to kill men too.
Did
I don't
you
know.
read the book? Because you said you weren't.
I
going
read
to.
excerpts of the book.
You-
Sure.
Yeah, Chat
sure.
GPT.
Sure.
Because that's not what I said.
Oh, so what did you say? So what? So talk to me about women sticking their tongue out.
Well, just briefly, because it's not actually relative to whether feminism is good for
is.
women and children.
You're attacking
which
women
is-
for sticking their tongue
I'm
out.
not I'm attacking women.
You're right. They're Hindu goddesses and they
That's
want men.
not what I said. Anyone who's read the book would know. By the way, way, go buy it. It's on Amazon. Occult Feminism: The Secret History of Women's Liberation. It will
If I had
explain,
it-
though.
If I had it,
It
I would
will
use it as
explain
toilet paper.
how during the 70s there was a big goddess worship revival in the West that coincided with feminism, and that they do still now. If you go to TikTok, look up the hashtag witch talk, and you will see feminists showing you how to perform ritual abortions, how to worship ancient goddesses like Lilith and Inanna, and they take it very
Well,
seriously.
you really are
Do you
nuts.
know that I'm not nuts?
You are
Witchcraft,
absolutely crazy.
That's really interesting because she goes ahead and points out something very specific that somebody could go ahead and do and look up that is something that is easily falsifiable. So if it is false, somebody could look it up and be like, that is factually inaccurate and defeat the argument right away. But because he cannot really do that, he's just going to insult it. Now, if you were to go ahead and take a look at TikTok and put in those search queries, I imagine that you would find all that nonsense on there. And that's exactly something he doesn't want to defend in this argument.
okay,
That
well,
shit
here's,
crazy.
I'm not crazy. Witchcraft,
Sticking your tongue out.
witchcraft is the #1 fastest growing religion among young women in the West. Did you know that?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know why?
So that's not me.
You know why?
That's them telling you that.
No, I know
They're
that.
telling you they believe it.
I am very very
Now, whether
aware
you
of
believe
that.
witchcraft is real or not doesn't matter. They're
Well,
saying
you know why?
they believe it.
You know why I feel that way? Because I think most people that are into that think that it's inclusive. It's not oppressive,
That's
maybe
right.
like
That's
Christianity.
actually correct.
They
That's
feel
what
like
they
they
say.
feel like maybe that it's empowering.
So you love witchcraft.
I'm going by why I think you could make.
Witchcraft is cool, you
could-
guys. It's very inclusive. It's very
Well,
progressive.
you believe in the Bible, right? And God killed 2.4 million people in the Bible. Is that oppressive? I don't know.
I believe in Orthodox Christianity, and I'm not going to get into a Bible
Of
debate
course
with
you're
you
not.
because
No, of
it's
course you're not.
beyond the scope of this.
So here,
Yeah, so he's just trying to bring things in and like rope in whatever he can in the last 5 minutes of this debate because he is getting shellacked on the actual arguments about whether feminism is good for women and children. And so he is trying to go ahead and come up with all these little things, these vines that he could try to hold on to rather than actually dealing in good faith on the topic of the debate.
so
This
we
discussion.
only got a couple minutes
Show
left
me
here.
so do you have an argument? Tell me how feminism has improved the lives of women and children when I just opened with all these statistics proving that
I'll
we
use
are,
your argument
we
because
are
I want to
worse
move
off.
on to one other thing, but I'll just use the argument that you used 20 minutes ago. It's retarded. So
What's retarded?
there's a lot of
Feminism?
problems. There's a lot of
Feminism is
so hold on.
retarded?
There's a lot of problems in
So
this
he
country.
agrees
I
with
think
me?
we all know. Okay, there's a
You
lot
didn't
of
answer the
there's a lot.
question.
I'm
How has
finished. Hold on. We have 3 minutes left here. We have a lot of problems in this country. We've talked a little bit about it, right? Education, healthcare, jobs, debt. This is why Republicans, women, female Republicans, are not entering. The reason why is because this is what Rachel is focused on. She's not focused on those other topics that I just brought up. I think a lot of people are. It's an uninspiring ideology that you have.
Talking about?
I'm talking about your ideology. I'm talking about your ideology.
What's
and the
my
reason
ideology?
why
What's
I
it
think you've
called?
made it.
Yeah, so it's interesting because he's not actually pointing out any specific things that he has put for the defense of his case or actually labeling anything that he is going against her in her case. He is just using innuendo to just try to talk around it. And it's not really landing because he's not being direct in his assault.
Very clear to everybody what your
Patriarchy.
ideology
Yes,
is. I think it's very
patriarchy.
clear what you think women should be doing. Listen, as I've said before,
Having families with good men who protect them and take care of them, yes, I think that's great.
and what if a
Are
woman
you against that?
absolutely not. What would you say to a woman that hasn't found the right man? She's in her mid-30s. What should she do?
Go to church?
Go to church.
Yeah.
So you think church will help her
I think
find?
she could find a good man in church.
But there are women out there, 30s, 40s,
Yeah.
that haven't found the right man.
Well, is it that they haven't found the right man, or is it that they've been through about 50 men and
Okay, so I think she went ahead and hit this right out of the park with this one because a lot of women meet a litany of men in their 20s and in their 30s. And so when they end up single and childless in their 30s and 40s, some of it is by choice, but most of it is because they haven't found a guy that actually meets their standards. Now, that brings up an idea of whether their standards are insane or not. Like, if they think that they value a top shelf kind of guy and whether they actually merit a top shelf kind of guy, that's something that a lot of women nowadays are having a real problem with, is their expectations are outside of the scope of their reality. And so when these women are having a hard time coupling later on in life, it is often the consequences of their actions in their 20s. And they don't want to take responsibility for the fact that they have had choices in their past, and a lot of the best choices that they could have had for a husband or a long-term relationship were sitting in their friend zone instead of somebody that they were hopping into bed with.
Haven't
You
wanted to
shouldn't
lock
talk,
any
you
of them
shouldn't talk
down.
about yourself like that, Rachel.
I've been with a handful, like less than 5. So, no, I'm
Without
talking
feminism, you would not
I'm
have been allowed
talking about-
to break up with those men,
I
right?
didn't.
Would you agree with that?
I didn't.
You weren't married to any other men?
I was, but I
Okay.
didn't initiate
100 years ago,
divorce.
you wouldn't have been able to divorce them,
didn't.
right?
I didn't divorce them. I was abandoned by an abusive person.
Okay, so
Yes.
100 years.
Okay, so this is interesting. So he did not know her story. And so he went out on a limb on the last, couple of minutes of this debate to try to attack her on her body count, which failed to land because she doesn't really have a body count compared to what he was saying. 50 versus less than 5, that's a huge difference. And so that failed to land. And then he goes ahead and tries to double down and says, without feminism, you wouldn't have been able to leave those relationships, assuming that she was the one who filed. And it turns out that it wasn't the case. She was abandoned. And so he just looks like insane at the end of this debate, because instead of doing the research and understanding who his opponent was, if he's going to make personal attacks, make sure that your personal attacks actually land. Right? If you're going to go ahead and do it for the benefit of an audience, that's the problem. Now, the issue with him is he failed to actually do the research, and this landed poorly for him. Let's continue.
Years ago, you wouldn't have been able to.
Yes, you would have. I just told you that in the year 1900, 55,700 divorces were granted to women who were in abusive marriages. So yes, I would have. And by the way, one more thing.
Disagree.
I would be able to be here without feminism. This is a very stupid.
Hold up. Lion Brian. So I'm not sure if you're kind of like a scam account, but let's go ahead and do this. The moderator was biased because he stopped him from interrupting Rachel. Okay, so this was in the introduction, or this was after opening statements. And so both participants had 5 minutes. Brian was to go ahead, because he had the affirmative case, he had 5 minutes of uninterrupted time to make his case after his opening statement and after Rachel's opening statement. Then she was given 5 minutes uninterrupted as a rebuttal. Brian, 10 seconds into the rebuttal, started interrupting, even though by the actual structure of the debate that both of them agreed to, that he could not stop from interrupting. So he was given a warning to start, and then less than 10 seconds later, he once again interrupted her out of his emotionalism, and then the moderator had to mute his mic, because during that portion of the debate, because they weren't in open dialogue yet, there was 5 minutes of putting forth the affirmative position, 5 minutes of the rebuttal. Both of those things were to be uninterrupted time. And so Rachel did her part, Brian did not do his part. After that, they had open interlocutor, which is what they're doing right now, where they could just go back and forth. It's a matter of the debate structure, and it's just factually inaccurate in this case, Lion Brian. All right, let's continue.
Stupid, silly rebuttal. Yes.
it's not stupid
Mary
at all.
Wollstonecraft, yes, the anti-suffragists were having public debates against suffragists in 1848, you dumbass.
I understand that.
So women were allowed to speak publicly. Women have always been allowed to speak. They've been allowed to write books, and they have been allowed to be part of the public discourse even far before they could vote. He is ignorant and doesn't know his history.
Yeah.
I hate to
So-
do this, but
so-
we really do have to transition. I hate to do it, but we do have to, as we are limited on time, as we've already gone.
She called me a
over
dumbass,
time
but okay, go ahead.
for the cross section.
No,
I
don't
guess
be
I
a
can't
dumbass.
respond to that.
And someone has to have the last word during the open dialogue.
Go ahead.
We
Go
do
for it.
have to go to the Q&A, which I'll ask you
Sure.
folks to get ready for in just a second. But first, I want you to get ready for some groundbreaking news from Farm Easy Bank, your trusted ally in health and
All right,
well-being, with an
We're going to go ahead and do them a solid and make sure that the ad read goes on. So we're going to go ahead and make sure that he gets his ad read in.
extensive range of generic medications, Pharmacy Bank caters to all your needs. From easing pain to managing chronic conditions, they've got it all at prices that won't be beaten. Quality assurance isn't just a promise, it's their commitment. All products come exclusively from reputable certified sources to ensure top quality effectiveness and safety. Looking for essential and high demand medicines? Pharmacy Bank now offers ivermectin, fenbendazole, Senforce, Fildena, and all ED products, azithromycin, weight loss products, including oral semaglutide, diabetic care products. Think high quality equals high cost. Think again. Pharmacy Bank gives you the opportunity to save big. Use coupon code UNCENSORED for an instant 20% off your order. Time is precious, and Pharmacy Bank saves yours with fast, secure shipping directly to your doorstep. Healthcare has never been this easy and hassle-free. Remember, listener, your health is your greatest asset. Take control with Pharmacy Bank. Visit pharmacybank.com and begin your wellness journey today. Don't delay. Your health is calling. Answer it with Pharmacy Bank. Hop over to pharmacybank.com/uncensored and take the first step toward a healthier, happier you. As we witness this high-stakes clash of ideas, it's important to remember that the most important battle you'll ever face is the one happening inside your own body right now. Most people don't realize that environmental...
We're going to go ahead and pause the ad read real quick. Brian always spits facts and brings receipts. Darren, if we looked at the entirety of the debate, he had a really hard time backing up his facts. Like, he went ahead and brought in a random fact, but then when was challenged, for example, on the birth rate, he brought in a study from the last 2 years when the birth rate was below replacement for the last 50. So when Rachel had tackled his theory as to why that was the case, it was the receipts weren't on his side. All right, let's continue.
Studies show the average person is carrying anywhere from 10 to 50 microscopic parasites at any given time. Even more staggering, it's estimated that nearly 80% of all chronic health issues can be traced back to toxic heavy metal accumulation and parasitic infections. We aren't just talking about a slow metabolism. We're talking about the root causes of brain fog, unexplained fatigue, and a weakened immune system. If you feel like you're operating at 50%, it's likely because you're being drained from the inside out. That is why Purge Store exists. To win the day and to keep your mind sharp for complex debates, you have to clear out the biological interference. Purge Advanced Digestive Cleanse is a precision-engineered formula designed to flush out those hidden parasites and reset your digestive environment from the ground up. Then there is ToxiBinder, Advanced Heavy Metal Detox. We live in a world saturated with aluminum, mercury, and lead, and ToxiBinder acts as a systemic magnet, trapping those heavy metals and safely removing them from your organs and bloodstream. When you remove the toxins, you restore your edge. It's about total body sovereignty. Stop letting your environment dictate your health. It's time to detox and reclaim your clarity. Head over to purgestore.com/debate right now. We've set up a special offer for everyone following this event. Use promo code DEBATE at checkout to unlock your discount. That's purgestore.com/debate, promo code DEBATE. Cleanse your system, clear your mind, and get back to 100%. With that, we're going to jump into the Q&A. If you want to form a line in the very middle of the room, we will take your questions. There is a piece of tape on the floor. If you can stand behind that piece of tape, we'll jump into it for this Q&A.
Uh-oh. I recognize some people on the line already. Uh-oh. Get that viral moment going, man.
We're ready for you.
Let's see if we can't get
By
back
the way,
to
I
where the
welcome
camera
anyone
is
going
at.
up there.
Might
All right.
be more strong than women.
Let's
with-
see.
I think if you're...
All right, let's go. Let's find where the beginning of, here we go. Here's where the video comes back on. All right, let's go ahead and get back into it. Let's see, okay.
faces
I said this on
anymore.
Pierce Morgan yesterday. I've been very clear on this issue. It's a good question. First of all, let me just say this right off the bat. I believe you're a man when you're born a man. I believe you're a woman when you're born a woman. Now, I'm still going to call people he, she to be respectful to them. No, I think I'd like to see a study that says if you're a transgender woman, you're more likely to commit a crime if you're in the bathroom. I'd like to see that stat because I haven't seen that stat. With that being said, I can understand how some women would feel uncomfortable with that, right? Transgender women should not be on the playing field with biological born women. I've been very clear on that. And I think I think most Democrats agree with me on that, but some are wrong that disagree with me on that. I think it's very unfair. With that being said, if we're talking about sports, I think there's like 8 or 9 transgender women that are in Division I college sports. I don't think it's a top 5 issue. I don't think it's a top 10 issue. But I've been very clear on my opinions on that, and I think it's wrong. At the same time, I know people who are transgender, and I treat them with respect. Is it something that I would do? No. But
Yeah, this doesn't have anything to do with the feminism debate. Let me go ahead and get the next question.
You're a woman, even if you're not a transgender.
Mhm.
Like,
well, here's my opinion on that.
Yeah, we're still talking transgender stuff. Let's move on to the next.
And committed assault.
Most
I'm not,
of them
I'm
don't
not
get
saying you
bottom
said that.
surgery,
I'm not.
though.
I'm answering a question.
Most of them just
I'm
wear a
answering a
dress.
question. I'm not saying you said that, but
All right,
that
cool.
idea
This is
to
finishing
me
up.
is a little bit absurd. So I hope I answered your question.
All
It's a
right,
good
let's see
question.
what the next question is.
Hello, Brian.
Hi.
So earlier you were talking about, you were talking about economics being why women don't want to reproduce as much.
Well, I didn't say that. John Hopkins did. That was just a study. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So I would argue that it's harder to create a business, which would drive the economy more
Mhm.
because of Democrat policies with a ton of red tape.
Which
And all
policies?
all the permits and everything that you got to get for basically anything. I mean, if you want
So what's the question?
backyard now, you got to go get a permit. Right.
Yeah.
Basically, I see it as it would be a better position to limit Democrat policies, remove a bunch of this red tape. If you disagree, I'd like to hear your rebuttal.
What
to that.
specific policy and red tape are you referring to?
Well, I mean,
Yeah, this guy's not doing a good job of asking a well-focused question.
Which Democrat specific policy? Because it's hard for me to answer when you give me a generalized statement.
okay,
like
so
that.
I see it as a right to have a business and to make a living.
Democrats aren't giving you the right to
And-
have a business and make a living?
They're substituting your right by having you purchase a
And-
license, right?
Okay, and which specific policy about a license are you referring to? Last I
Yeah, we'll go to the next question. This guy, he didn't do a very good job of asking a question.
that's
Right.
all.
You talked a lot about freedom and how she wouldn't be here without feminism. So, like, if you go back to the actual history of feminism, there's a big history in eugenics and when you get to abortion. So, I just want to know how you feel about, like, if it
Abortion.
actually was like feminism to the highest extent, I wouldn't be here because they actually had a eugenics program that was literally called the Negro Project,
Mhm.
and that was to literally eliminate people like me, literally black people. So,
So you're saying because of feminism, black people wouldn't exist?
yes, literally.
Okay.
Yes.
Literally.
Okay. I'm not going to respond to that because I'm not going to respond to something when I'm unaware of it. I don't.
Well, it's interesting because Margaret Sanger, is a pretty big feminist, and she went ahead and founded Planned Parenthood. And so if we go ahead and look at how many of the Black population had been aborted in their mother's womb, I mean, the guy's got a point there.
If you're saying because of
The
feminism,
invention
an
of
entire
sorry.
race of people wouldn't be here, I'll look that up. I'm not aware of that. I'll look it up.
That's
But
literally where
how many
abortion
years
came
ago
from.
are we talking about?
Yeah, he's mischaracterizing the question. He's not saying that it eliminates blacks, but they would seek to do so in terms of encouraging black women to get abortions more so than white women. And there are studies to go ahead and back that up.
Huh?
How many years ago?
Whenever
It would be like 1928, the
Okay.
founding of Planned
Okay.
Parenthood with Margaret Sanger, and the same
Okay.
thing in the UK
So-
with the
it
Marie
was literally
Stopes
founded on
project.
Mhm.
a genocide.
Well, I'll look
project.
that up. You can find me on Twitter, and I promise you I'll answer your question.
I would love to see the response to that.
I will. Shoot me an email. I put my email out there to everybody, and I'm happy to answer that. I'll look it up. Okay?
Great.
All right, let's see. Rob Norris next. Let's see what
How's
he's
it going,
got.
Brian? I appreciate that you said that, like, you had to bring up the personal stuff. I think that is true, and sometimes people don't understand when you're.
So for
having
those of you who don't know who this guy is, I had a few debates with him, and this should be
It's
a
Rob
very
Knorr.
very
The great Rob Knorr,
fun
everybody.
Thank you.
yeah.
I was actually giving you a compliment. I'm sorry. It's difficult in debates like this where there's a personal nature and you have to bring in things that are relevant to people's lives. It's not really an insult, even when you're implying she slept with 50 men. I understand how it's important to this debate, and I appreciate that. So, given that, feminists such as Melissa Fabello and Caitlin Berg have written extensively about the problem of men adapting feminist talking points in order to harm women. Given allegations that have been made against you of financially exploiting women and your treatment of Savannah Hernandez, who was assaulted by a
I'm
man,
happy to
and
talk
how
about
you
that.
mocked them, do you think,
Happy
and
to
this is
talk
the
about
question
that.
to both of you, do you think that you exhibit those same sort of toxic behaviors of
Happy.
men embracing feminist talking points in order
Sure.
to attack women?
I'm happy to.
Wow. Okay. So there's some background to this. Clearly, there's some research as to what had happened and some allegations against Brian Shapiro. And what's interesting is Brian Shapiro had opened the door to this by personally attacking Rachel in the debate. So it opens up the door for that to be relevant in terms of Q&A. So now Rob Noor went ahead and accurately pointed out that sometimes, based on the nature of the debaters in a debate stage, sometimes it makes sense to put forth somebody's personal business as part of the debate to try to discredit them and their arguments, which is something that I think that Brian Shapiro had done poorly in this debate, though it is something that can be done if you do it well. Now, because Brian opened the door to personal attacks, now Rob is asking about his nature, asking about how when men pick up feminist talking points to abuse women, this is something that's well cataloged, by the way. It is an interesting set of circumstances because Brian has been accused of doing this exact thing. So we'll see what he has to say about it. And we'll see what Rachel has to say about it too.
Talk about that. So first of all, I'll start with Savannah Hernandez. By the way, nobody's been arrested in that situation. I've been talking to Savannah for 3 years. Never have I ever condoned violence or said somebody deserves to be assaulted on either side of the aisle. I've said that on 4 national networks since that incident happened. I said it on Pierce yesterday. My issue with Savannah Hernandez is this. And by the way, the worst thing I said to her was I called her a grifter, a right-wing grifter. Okay. Now, I also interviewed somebody that used to work with her at InfoWars, had her on my show, agreed with me. That doesn't mean that anybody deserves to be assaulted. I've said that over and over again. The family and the man who pushed her, which I know he regrets doing that, they've had death threats. There have been people that have threatened to rape the wife and the daughter. I've had plenty of private conversations with them and their attorneys. With that being said, I've also said, if somebody gets arrested, charged, and convicted, let the chips fall where they may. What I don't like are people like the Cam Higbees, like the Nick Sorters, and others that go to political rallies and they're looking to get that viral moment. Now, do I know if Savannah Hernandez wanted to be pushed or not? No, I don't. But I do know that when you go to these types of events and you're looking for that viral moment and you're not a journalist, that was my other issue with Savannah. Her first job was at InfoWars, okay? She's never wrote articles about anything. She's not a real journalist. And when you go around the country asking people what's a man and what, by the way, I'm not a journalist either. I never said I was. When you go around the country saying what's a man and what's a woman,
kind of turning
that
into
doesn't make you a journalist. And by the
Yeah, it sounds like he's just filibustering. There is a background and he's not actually addressing it.
way, any allegations that you've talked about, any, are false. And why do I say that?
We do have to wrap this up.
Okay, well, this
He'll
is
go on
important.
forever.
I had a death threat yesterday where somebody said they were going to go, they put my address out there. I got into this
What does
business
this have to
knowing
do with
he
feminism?
asked me the question. I'm answering
It
it.
doesn't even have to do with the
Then
question.
blame him. It
Just-
wasn't about
just-
feminism.
Just
He
real quick
asked
follow
if you
up.
adopted feminist talking
He made
points
claims.
to attack women. And
So
you're
the answer
talking
is
about
no.
people
The
doxing.
answer is
I'll
no.
just say real quick, I understand it seems your argument there is you have to be careful with accusations or it could lead to death threats.
The answer is no.
You call
No.
Trump a pedo all the time. They just tried to kill him like 3 days ago.
Who's
Yeah.
they? Who's they?
The person that
The person.
was the
Thank you.
anti-Trump.
Thank you. The person.
Yeah. Will you retract you calling Trump a pedo and will you acknowledge that rhetoric?
What I have
helps lead
said-
to damage
What
against
I
him
have
and
said
threats?
over and over again, I believe, just like I believe with Bill Clinton, that both Bill Clinton and Donald Trump have probably did some horrible things to women. Donald Trump is also a liable sexual abuser. Donald Trump is
Yeah, so he's going to go ahead and go into the E. Jean Carroll case, which is a really ridiculous standard for this conduct. So we can get into that some other time.
is also named 30,000 times in the Epstein files. And if you're going to say that I believe that Donald Trump may have done some horrible things to kids, then maybe you should call out the other side too. Donald Trump just asked for, hold on, 6 Democrats he called for them to be executed 3 months ago. Donald Trump is the guy who said, rough him up, I'll pay your legal bills. So if you're going to call out one side, you better call out the other one too. You're done now.
The next question.
You're done. I answered your question.
So to be fair, Rob Noor had asked this question specifically of both Brian and Rachel. And so Brian goes ahead and takes up the majority of the answering time. And Dr. Kuntz is trying to go ahead and get him to finish up a thought. And then Rachel is trying to have an opportunity to answer this same question because it was asked of her too. And Brian's trying to go ahead and shut her up. Ridiculous.
James, since Rob said that was a question for both of us, I just want to quickly say this guy who is the white knight defender of women and
I never
wants to
said I was
protect-
the white knight.
You want to protect women, yet your very first DM to me was asking how many beers my husband had to have in order to
I did say that.
work
You know
up
why?
the-
I'll
work
defend
up
that.
the guts to have sex
I'll
with
defend
me.
that. I'll defend that. And it goes to what Rob Noor just said. Here's the reason why I said that.
Wow. So he said something hilariously wrong, and he's trying to go ahead and defend it now. And like, he really should just take the L on this one, but he's going to go ahead and dig in. Let's see what happens.
She put out a tweet.
I shared a tweet.
Excuse me.
somebody
Let me
else
just answer.
put
Let me
out.
at least defend myself. She put out a tweet, a
I didn't say
retweet, whatever you
did
call it.
I just shared
Doesn't
a
matter.
tweet about
She
it.
has a large platform, and she retweeted, or whatever you want to put it, a story about me with all the worst. My sister passed away at the age of 37. The person in this article, she doesn't care.
So rather than directly answering the question, he's going to go ahead and obfuscate and go and talk all around this rather than actually answering or making a direct defense. This is crazy.
Yeah. Again, she doesn't. She
You
can give,
just
she can give
can't-
two shits.
you
I'm
can't be
answering why.
precise.
I'm defending why I called you
Get
that
it
and why I
out
said
quickly.
that.
There's
Because I
no
was.
excuse for you to say
Oh,
that
okay,
to
but it's
me.
an excuse
You
to
don't
call
know
people
me.
retards. Get lost. Go ahead. Excuse.
I'm saying you don't give a fuck about women.
No, I don't give a fuck about
You
you.
are a sneaky fucker, is what you are. He pretends
Oh,
to be
please.
a feminist so that he can get into
Please.
women's
Move on.
spaces and
Please.
do
Move on.
things to them.
Please, you
Yes.
defend.
Right.
Yeah, so that actually goes to the direct question that Rob had asked is, do you take on feminist talking points to go ahead and ingratiate yourself with women to do them harm? And that's exactly the accusation that's being levied. And so instead of dealing with it directly, he talks around it, and Rachel just kind of puts it back to him.
Be a
We're going to go to
Christian,
the
you're a
next
fake
question.
Christian.
We're ready for you. Go ahead.
Okay, so Brian, we would agree that a man that turns 18 years old cannot willfully opt out of conscription, correct?
Yeah.
What duty to this country can a woman opt out of
What duty to this country that can a woman opt out of?
Can they not
without
opt out of?
consequence?
I mean, I guess nothing.
Okay,
Yeah.
You know?
exactly. The other
All right. So the point that this lady is making with her question is, once again, that men bear a disproportionate amount of duties and responsibilities in our society for which there are government imposed consequences. So, for example, she's talking about conscription, which is about the draft, which is about selective service. And men, once they turn the age of 18, they must, by color of law, sign up for selective service, or there's going to be substantial consequences. And then the question was, what fundamental duties do women have that they can opt out of, but will face consequences? And Brian Shapiro correctly answered that they do not. That's the thing. That's the damning piece of this whole debate that he is having a really hard time actually dealing with.
point is we would also agree that men unfortunately hold the monopoly on violence statistics in the country, right?
Yeah, I would say
Okay.
that's probably accurate.
Trans woman.
What is
What is a trans woman?
What do you mean, what is a trans woman?
What biologically is a trans woman?
She's trying to go ahead and get him to say that a trans woman is a man, and he's going to go ahead and obfuscate.
Already said, were you not paying attention? I said, if you're born a man, I believe you're a man. I believe if
Okay,
you're
so
born a
now
woman,
you
you're a
have
woman.
the
Another
statistics for
trans
why
question?
trans women shouldn't be allowed in women's
Okay,
bathrooms.
well, that's just ridiculous. I can't believe people are clapping at that. This is so, hold on a second. Let me,
No, that's pretty accurate. She went ahead and made a logical line of questions asking about, hey, look, are men typically more violent or for violent crime? Appealing to what he would go ahead and think is correct. He didn't argue about it. And then she went ahead and asked him a trapping question about whether trans women are men. He answered forthrightly. And then he's like, okay, now based on those two things, do you see the logical connection and why we wouldn't want trans men in women's bathrooms? There you go. Like that's the 1, 2, 3 is 2 questions. You put them together and you end up with a conclusion. And he did not see it coming and didn't like that.
respond to that. What a ridiculous thing to say. So
How is that ridiculous?
So well, be quiet. Let me.
That was
I hear
perfectly
all the
coherent.
time. Again, the trans issue again. When we talk about mass shootings in this country, and when there
Let's
happens
not.
to be a trans shooter, everybody says, "Oh, look at that! It's another trans person." It's almost like you're wishing it's a trans person. Less than a fraction of 1%. Less than a fraction of 1% of all the mass shootings in this country are conducted by trans women. You know, the demo is usually it's young white men. You could look up that statistic. So I'm not going to answer any more stupid trans questions. It's so insane.
So this goes back to the whole per capita argument. So if you've got 13% of the population committing 50% of the murder, that's a disproportionate amount of the murder being conducted by a relatively small amount of people. That's not the case in terms of like mass shootings, trans versus white men. That's not the point that I'm making, but I'm putting out an example of how if you fail to recognize that there are cultural impetuses to these things, that you're going to misunderstand how reality works. And so you can look at, oh, hey, well, 40% of murders are done by white people. Right, but how about another 50%? Who are they being done by? Never mind the fact that we've got a lot of police districts that are going ahead and putting Hispanics and Middle Eastern dudes as white in the racial category to go ahead and muddy those statistics. Never mind that. Let's continue.
And ridiculous.
So you've shown a lot of righteous indignation throughout this debate.
I wouldn't say that. I'm honest. I wouldn't say that.
All right,
I'm shooting it right back at her. I wouldn't say that.
It's my opinion.
I'm not a saint.
All right.
I never claimed I was.
So Andrew has an argument where he talks about women had influence before they had the right to vote, universal suffrage. And he has an argument. He positions it as they got the temperance movement passed. I'm going to just do a little twist for you. They also wrote a book, Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin, and it helped propel the abolition of slavery, which you somehow thought still existed 50 years ago.
I have to press you to a question.
Okay. The question is, how do you answer that question? Where women had influence, right? They didn't have universal suffrage, but they were still put on a pedestal and they were able to influence society and help get the abolition of slavery passed.
Yeah, I thought that was Abraham Lincoln. Am I wrong on that?
That was a war, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so he's answering in bad faith. So Brian Shapiro had mistakenly stated earlier on in the debate that slavery was still going on 50 years ago. So 50 years ago, 2026, that puts us to 1976. That's after the Civil Rights Act, and it's after slavery was abolished substantially because that happened in the mid 1800s. So that's 100 and something years ago, and he misspoke. He also misspoke about how women couldn't be authors. He misspoke about how women couldn't influence public policy. And this man is trying to go ahead and get him to acknowledge that he made mistakes in what he was saying. Now, from Brian's perspective, it would be much better for him to just say, hey, look, I misspoke about slavery. I know that was what the Civil War was about. Yes, Uncle Tom's Cabin was an influential work. And yes, that is an exceptional circumstance. Very few books written at that point in time were written by women. And then he can make a leftist argument from there. I think that would be the better line of attack. But instead, he's joking about, oh, I thought Lincoln did it. And so he has better arguments that are available to him, and he is failing to use that in the debate here.
There was two different.
So women
parties.
ended slavery.
Women helped move the abolition movement. You know, there's an abolition.
I
movement,
understand
right?
that, but you're making the case that that's a bad thing. I'm trying to understand.
He's saying women
Why
had
are
a
you-
voice without suffrage.
Yeah, they still had a voice. They were put
Okay.
on a
You
pedestal.
think
They
that's
didn't
bad?
need political equality
No,
in
it's
order
not
to
bad.
have an effect.
So,
Yes.
so what's your question then?
The question is, women could still have influence without having suffrage.
Yeah, he's trying to get him to understand that his statement earlier was inaccurate and to go ahead and take the L and move on. But he's not going to take the L. He's just going to go ahead and obfuscate.
Well, yeah,
agree with
that's kind of what we want in society, right?
Yeah, I think that's what I want. Yeah.
I don't want women to suffer. I'm trying to understand what the question is.
Oh, wow. Very clever.
Go ahead, sir.
All right. I'm a Hindu, so I.
By the
know-
way, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm very aware that everybody in this room disagrees with me, but that doesn't stop.
Wow. So he goes ahead and interrupts this guy right away. Wild.
Me from coming here.
Funny because
and-
in DMs you said that you were going to sell at least as many tickets as me.
Oh, I'd like to see that DM. I don't remember saying that.
You said
Go
we'll
ahead.
see about that. I think.
Yeah, I
plenty
never
of
said I
people
was
are
going to
gonna
sell
buy
as many tickets
for
as
me.
you. I never said that.
So I'm a Hindu.
This is why people don't want to debate you.
All right, we do have
Go
to go to
ahead.
the next question.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm a Hindu.
Yeah.
I really do believe in like gods and goddesses too. So why do you think mocking other religions is a good thing about
No,
feminism?
I wasn't mocking other. Okay, so give me the statement that I made. Mocking other religions.
That's so funny because basically he's putting putting the onus back on Brian in this, and Brian is unprepared because he is busy morally grandstanding through most of this debate and basically clutching his pearls at things that he found to be offensive, and then now he's kind of put back to it. We'll see what he does.
So like when you in your own debate, when in this
Yeah.
debate you were talking about like she said in her book about
Right,
like there's women like mocking about like
Right.
Hey, MJP 9000. So I think that in this debate, there were 2 points that were brought up. One point was about having a civics test, and the other point was having net taxpayer suffrage. I think that both of those are reasonable things to do. And unfortunately, because the case is that women are more often to be net takers than net contributors to society, that they would be caught up, and a good many of them would end up losing their suffrage as a result of a net taxpayer-based suffrage system. But that would be the case for the vast majority of men as well. So it isn't just about limiting suffrage for women. Let's go ahead and be clear on that and what the arguments are. All right, let's continue.
gods.
Yeah, I was mocking her. I wasn't mocking religion in general. Let me be very clear. I'll clear this up for you. I believe everybody has the right to believe in whatever you want to believe in, you can believe in. My problem with religion in general terms is that too many people, like Rachel, push their beliefs on other people. And if they don't believe in what she believes in her God, she calls people retarded. I want you to believe in what you want to believe in, and you have that right to do that. I would never want to take that right away from you. I don't care what religion you guys could believe in the tooth fairy if you want. You have the right to freedom of religion. I would never want to take that away from you, sir. I've been very clear on that.
I think this is going to be our last question we can take.
Mr. Shapiro and Ms. Wilson, can you each say something kind to each other?
That's the best question. Go ahead, Rachel, you first.
I decline.
Yeah. Well, here's what I would say. And I'm not surprised she would say that. Because before we were in the green room,
Remember, we're asking for something kind.
I know,
Be sure.
before we were in the green room, I said, hey, I'd love to shake their hands. I'm happy, even though obviously we have our personal grievances, which I think both of us would agree. I was happy to shake their hands and be professional. I said, hey, have them come in. Love to say hello to them and be kind. They declined. I was trying to be professional. But I will say this. You're an opinion.
Just to clarify.
It's funny. He cannot answer a question straight. This man was given a question and he has to tell a 5-minute story to get to something simple.
Rachel wasn't here yet when.
Okay, well, whatever. You know,
Yeah.
that's.
So then Dr. Kuntz goes ahead and rightly points out that Brian Shapiro is telling a story about a time that Rachel wasn't even present. So whatever this story is about is not directly related to anything complimentary of Rachel whatsoever, which was the basis of the question.
Andrew was here. You said he was in the other room, right?
Andrew was here.
Okay, and I said they're both welcome to come in, and I'm happy to say hello to them.
Okay, what's your nice thing you want to say about Rachel?
Gonna have to think about this. Give me 10 seconds here.
Yeah, so there you go. You just got to go ahead and come up with something. Whereas, like, you could go ahead and say something. Like, even if it's something surface level, like you could go and say, hey, I like your stupid hat. I mean, that would be a backhanded compliment, but it'd still be like framed as if it's a compliment.
I owe nothing and no respect to a person who's going to publicly try to accuse me of believing things I don't believe, saying things I don't say, and being promiscuous, which I've never been in my life.
Okay. So
let's not pretend there's a pretense of professional decorum here, because
what was
there's
the
just
question?
not.
Was the question
Do you
say
want to
something
say
nice about one another or
Everyone says
attack?
something nice about each other.
Yeah,
No,
Okay, we'll
I
go to the next
decline.
question.
I decline.
good.
So he took all that time to go ahead and decline. So Rachel at least was concise in her declination, and she rightly pointed out that there is no professional decorum between the two of them. They've been at each other on Twitter and on social media for an extended period of time prior to this debate. So there should be no expectation of professional decorum other than what is required by the terms and conditions of the debate itself. So I don't see why anybody would be surprised at this. I just think it's crazy how Brian takes forever to answer a simple question.
Actually, that is all we have for Q&A. I do want to make sure that we get the closings in. So we
Okay.
do
Oh, there we
actually
go.
have to
Closing
jump into the
statements. Let's
closing.
go.
These
Yeah,
are
this is gonna be
3-minute
great.
time sections. I've got the time.
Okay, so 3-minute timed closing statements. We're going to go ahead and listen to them and analyze them and see what we can come up with.
Timer set for you. And Brian.
You want me to go
you're-
first again?
Yes. In each case, you'll be going.
Yeah, so it is typically the structure that the affirmative case goes first, both in the opening and in the closing. So he is confused about how the structure of the debate goes. Let's continue.
First, the floor is all yours, Brian.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. I do a lot of shows that are way far to the right. I'm happy to do them, regardless of whether people agree or disagree with me. But I'm going to talk about something now very serious, and it's an emotional thing. And when I was doing debate prep for this debate, I learned of a horrible story that I am very sad to hear. That you had lost your 10-year-old son in a car accident, and my condolences to your family. It's awful. And unfortunately, we have something like that in common, Rachel, and I am truly sorry that happened to you. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. When I was 12 years old, my whole family got into a very serious car accident. I lost my grandmother. It's the reason why my sister passed away a few years ago, because of her injuries. And I learned at a very young age how precious life is. What does this have to do with feminism? Life is really short. And again, I say again, how sorry I am that your family had to go through that. It's horrible. And the reason why I talk about how short life is, I don't want to tell you guys what to do. I don't want to tell you guys that you can't vote because you're poor. I don't want to tell you guys that you can't be in the workplace. If you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a stay-at-home mom with kids, I think that's all great. I don't want to tell you what to do. When I was 14 years old, my dad introduced me to 2 radio hosts, Howard Stern and Don Imus. I didn't really like Don Imus very much. I said, Dad, I want to be like that. I want to be on the radio one day. And my family supported me. And I had to work really fucking hard, pardon my French, to get to where I am, to be able to even do something like this, to be able to go on Pierce Morgan, to be able to do those things. And I'm very humbled by that. But it wasn't because I'm a guy. It wasn't because I'm a male. It's because I worked my ass off, which I'm still doing every day. And if a woman listens to their dad growing up and they want to be a radio host, or they want to be a doctor or a nurse, or maybe they're poor, but they're still involved in politics and they want to vote, I say, do what makes you happy. Live your life. Don't listen to somebody, no matter what religion they are or who they are, tell you what to do with your life. I'm doing what I'm doing now because I worked hard. It has nothing to do with my gender or because I'm a woman. We all have tragedies in life, and I'm sorry for yours. And I wish we didn't have that in common because it's awful. Don't let other people tell you what to do. I know there's a lot of people in this crowd that probably disagree with a lot of what I said today. And listen, that's okay. We have the freedom to agree or disagree with people. That's what makes this country great. But we're all human beings. I'm not perfect. I make plenty of mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes in my life, and I've probably said things in my life that I regret, but I own it. And
all right. So he spent 3 minutes. Of his 3 minutes, he spent over 2 minutes talking about Rachel's dead son and how empathy is what should be the case, and how his personal gainings have nothing to do with who he is as a male or a female, but how hard he worked. So he's making an equality argument. However, he wrapped it up in this BS story. Like, it's not saying that it's BS that he had a car crash or anything like that, or that Rachel had a BS. But the thing is, the way that he couched it is BS. The actual framing of the argument that he is making is he'd be even better off going straight for an equality argument rather than causing problems for like bringing up this emotional story that has nothing to do with his argument. So he says, I don't want you to not vote because you're poor. So he's bringing up the net taxpayer thing, right? We talked about earlier how just because you're poor doesn't mean that you can go or you can't vote. The idea is that if you are contributing, you should be able to vote. That's the difference, right? Next, he was talking about, I want you to be able to do whatever you want. You know, that's a reasonable libertarian kind of thing to do, but it doesn't fundamentally answer the question, which is the root of the debate. The debate prompt is, is feminism good for women and children? That's the debate prompt right now. And his answer is, I just want you to be free to do whatever you want. He doesn't actually answer the prompt. So there's that. Let's go ahead and take a look at Rachel's closing.
so thank you all for being here. 5 seconds. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, James. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I appreciate it. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I love having good debates, and I appreciate all you guys being here. Thank you very much.
We could go over to Rachel for her 3-minute closing as well. The floor is yours, Rachel.
Very disappointing. We had no arguments from Brian whatsoever for why we should believe that feminism has been beneficial for women and children. He wasn't able to provide any data, any sort of measurement whatsoever to show that, hey, before feminism, this was what happened, and after feminism, this is what we got. We didn't get any of that. What we got was a whole bunch of logical fallacies and a person who doesn't understand what an argument is or how to debate. I'm going to list them off quickly, but join in the comments on the live stream if you caught more of these than I did. These were just some of the fallacies that we witnessed tonight from Brian. Non sequitur, argument from incredulity, straw man, ad hominem, category error, tu quoque fallacy, appeal to authority, argument ad populum. And on top of all that, we got moral outrage. We got appeals to your virtue and your emotions. And what we got from Brian ultimately was the best argument against feminism, because what feminism produces is emotionally incontinent, weak men who can't control themselves, who have violent outbursts, will insult you, will be angry and combative, and then try at the end of the debate to bring up your dead child and not even let you get through a debate in a professional manner addressing the topic at hand without crying and bringing up your dead son, who you probably don't want to be thinking about in the closing of a professional debate that you're trying to get through. So when he says, do what you want, man, follow how you feel. Life's short. Do what you feel like, just follow what you want. Follow your emotions. I would say no. Don't do that. Find a strong, virtuous man in your life who knows how to hold boundaries and protect you, who can control his emotions, who can be the force of strength and stability that families need that we don't have anymore. Don't be a male feminist like this. Don't be this emotionally incontinent, just going all over on a tangent, unable to control your thoughts, unable to control your emotions, just spewing and vomiting emotional appeals to people in the middle of a professional debate, bringing up dead children, bringing up your abusive ex-husband. Be the kind of person who can actually handle getting up here and having an argument, making an argument, sticking to the topic, controlling yourself. And the fact that I, a housewife from the Midwest with no college degrees, no professional training, am better able than him to do that, just shows you this is the kind of men that feminism has produced, and this is why society is all messed up.
Okay, cool. So up until the last closing line, I thought that she was off topic, but then she went ahead and brought it back in at the end where she was like, look, this guy right over here is the product of feminism. I think she is 100% right. She pointed out that he was resorting to moral outrage. He was crying. He was basically acting like a male feminist. You know, he didn't make any arguments. He didn't actually do anything to support, to make a comparison between times before feminism and times after feminism and why feminism is better for women and children, which was the whole point of the debate. Now let's go ahead and go back to something that MP 9000 said. Hey, so empathy is a funny thing. The left thinks that empathy is give everybody everything and never mind what actually happens. However, we're seeing in much of the West right now the natural results of suicidal empathy, you know, pardon the French, but where we go ahead and want to give everything to other people and then get taken advantage of. And I think that that is not in the best interest of a nation, and it is not in the best interest of people writ large. It's just not a great thing to give to others that have not earned rather than taking care of the people within your own nation. I think there's a big difference there. You can be empathetic, but empathy, I think, happens on an individual basis, does not happen on a societal or systemic basis. All right. Let's go ahead and figure it out. Find a strong man. Yeah, I think that a lot of women would be much better off if they were with strong men. Unfortunately, there aren't a whole lot of strong men running around. That's just what it is. So I think that in so many ways, Rachel had just completely dumpstered Brian in this debate. It was insane. What do we got? Find the film class / crew during this. All right. So what questions do you guys have after this? I think this was pretty interesting. I think that feminism, generally speaking, is not good for society and has not led to good outcomes. But I don't think that feminism is the root of it. I think that gynocentrism, the general centering of women's thoughts and feelings and all of this kind of stuff is the root of the problem, where guys go ahead and put women on a pedestal rather than making sure that men handle their duties, whereas women handle their responsibilities, because we as men and women are better together than we are apart. That's it. MJP 9000, you're really not good at making a point either, so I don't know what you're on about. Suicidal empathy is a thing that happens in the West. We see it because of the foreign invasion. We see it especially in Britain right now, where you've got a lot of roving outsiders that are causing violence upon the women of Great Britain, and it is well documented. So much so that we even have Pakistanis in law enforcement that are going ahead and helping this to happen. So you have internal and external mechanisms in Great Britain that we have documented to show what suicidal empathy is. That is the point, MJP 9000. I'm sorry that you do not notice the difference between violence and peace in a society and in a nation. It is important that we protect our own people and that we go ahead and look to build a better society. And it takes time to do that. All right, let's see. Anything else? Closing thoughts. I think that Brian Shapiro did a terrible job of actually staying to the topic of whether feminism was good or better for women and children, which was the prompt of the debate. He really stayed on emotional appeals. He stayed on dealing with trying to point out personal actions from women. Is MJP on the vertical side? It seems like he is. I see that on the vertical chat. But anyway, you can go ahead and make your own assessments from there. But anyhow, I think that he did a really poor job of actually sticking to the topic and really made a lot of emotional appeals and didn't really do a good job of actually pushing forth an idea that was related to the topic. And then as far as Rachel goes, like, because he was in the affirmative, it was his responsibility to show that that feminism is good, because that's how the debate works. Is if you are in the affirmative and you cannot show affirmatively that it is good, then that's just what it is. You failed to prove a point, and so by that nature, he had lost the debate. And she didn't really have to go ahead and knock down anything that he provided, because she was in the negative end of this debate. But she went ahead and did make a good point in several ways, where she was talking about how feminists have caused a lot of problems in the United States, and maybe it's probably not for the best interests of the United States and the West writ large for us to go ahead and have a lot of people that are net parasites on the system to be in charge of putting people into the system. So there you go. MJP, you have a real problem making an actual argument. Like, maybe if you had more time to go ahead and type it out properly, you could go ahead and do that. But suicidal empathy is when you go ahead and take empathy and you want to be empathic to people. And so you welcome them in terms of, so when we look at domestic policy and we look at immigration policy, this is a perfect example of suicidal empathy. The empathic part of it is we want to go ahead and let people into our nation because they're having a hard time in their nation of origin. That's the empathic part. The suicidal part is where they end up causing substantial crime because they don't meld or fit in with the existing culture as a whole. And as a result, there's substantial violence that comes alongside with it. And yet we still have people on the left that are still promoting these kinds of policies, even though we have the evidence that shows how bad it is for the inherent nation. So, like, maybe you can go ahead and make a better argument later, but I think you're just having a hard time understanding the weaknesses in your own argument on this one. All right, let's see. That is the debate in a nutshell. Brian had a lot of emotional appeals, and Rachel did a really good job of rebutting him. He really didn't put forth many arguments. In fact, the one argument that he did a really good job of elucidating was how, in a situation where you have multiple baby daddies, that it's bad for society, which, funnily enough, actually supports Rachel's position, because it is through feminism that we have like this multiple baby daddy thing, and we have this disregard for the sanctity of intimacy in relationship. And we have a lot of rampant promiscuity now, which was not the case in times past. And rampant promiscuity is something that has happened in the West after the sexual revolution in a lot of ways, in the 60s and the 70s. And prior to that, we did not have this rampant level of promiscuity. A lot of that has to do with birth control more than morality, because when you don't have to worry about getting pregnant, and you don't have to worry about having the consequences of your actions, that's just what the deal is. So there we go. If anybody has any final thoughts, I'll go ahead and entertain them for a little bit. And then if somebody has questions, this is a little bit outside of my normal content. I normally go ahead and talk about men's issues and family and men's rights and things of that nature. So it's interesting to see that I had a good amount of people on the left of center. Normally, most of my audience is on the right or in the middle. So a lot of libertarians, a lot of conservatives, because that's generally more in alignment with the kinds of things that I have to say. Let's see. All right, cool. Well, it sounds like we don't have any questions at the topic at hand. If you liked what you saw here, by all means, go ahead and shoot me a message. Go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. And I really appreciate you guys spending the time with me on this. And I go ahead and stream every Saturday at 12 noon Central Time. I'm going to go ahead and come up with the topic for next week's stream, and I'll go ahead and post about it early next week. Thank you so much for your viewership. I hope you all have a fantastic day.